Welcome to Life of Legacy, your key to a better life. I'm your host, Jonathan Lawrence Clark, and today we're in for a treat. Our topic today is building your inner circle. Is success about what you know or who you know? Today, our guest is a VP of IT for Randstad Canada and an executive business partner for Randstad Digital. He has over 20 years of business experience, including serving as IT consultant and HR strategy leader for Capgemini and Deloitte. He has a background in software application management, product management, digital transformation, as well as leveraging AI strategies for process automation. He's also a proud husband and father of two boys, which I'm sure he'll talk much about today. And
Yes,
he
sir.
enjoys riding motorcycles, playing some golf from time to time, which he's trying to get me to do.
Yes,
And
sir.
also, we share a passion for mentorship. He really enjoys mentoring others and helping up-and-coming professionals to achieve their potential in the workplace. Our guest today is Jomondre Frink. Welcome to Life of Legacy, Jomondre.
No, thanks for having me and thanks for that intro. I couldn't have said it better myself. I'm gonna have to record that and take that down and carry it with me as my elevator pitch. What you doing? No.
Okay, we pop my top a little bit. Okay, gave a good
Yeah,
intro. So I
yeah,
was going to
yeah.
make you feel welcome on the show. So I
No, I
appreciate
appreciate it.
your time
I
today.
appreciate it.
All right, all right. So I'm just going to highlight the topic for today, and then we're going to learn a little bit about you. All right.
Okay.
So topic today is building your inner circle, and this is about relationship building. Uh,
Very important.
and some people might maybe underestimate that a little bit in their professional development. Focusing on skill development and learning how to do what they do well,
Yeah.
and maybe underestimating the relationship part, but that can be a matter of opinion, right? Which one
Right.
should matter the most? But I want to ask you, can a person's relationships influence their level of success?
Absolutely. And has a direct correlation, both positive and negative. I think when I think about relationships and how I've learned to value them even more in both personal life and in, say, this path of, say, corporate ladder tracking or corporate success, or trying to kind of continue to grow in whatever, someone might, how they might describe that, is the relationships are powerful. I think the challenge that I had to overcome, being one of the first in my family to go off to college and enter kind of corporate America, is the term networking, right?
Okay.
And people can have a different connotation of what that means, and
Yeah.
it could come off as being very one-sided based on
Mm.
your experience with said networking or how it's been described to you. But what I had to realize, Jonathan, is once you pivot that to say, okay, how do I think about the relationships that might help me along, right, in my career? Then that shifts the narrative between what networking becomes, right? You really begin to build relationships that are sustainable and not looking to exchange a contact for benefit, if that makes sense.
Okay. So you seem to be saying that people's idea of the word networking and what that means
Yeah.
could uh, put some things around it that make them reluctant to engage in it or give a negative connotation to it.
Yeah, it can. So I use an example, right? And when early in my career, it's like, oh, you should network, expand your network, expand your network.
Hmm.
And the pathway to do so was trying to find networking events where you had no relationships whatsoever to begin with most of the time. And for a lot of us, I think it's challenging when you talk about entering a space where you seem to be looking and asking for something
Hmm.
versus becoming a natural part of just your being and who you are and who you work with in the past, right? And that's
Yeah.
where I think it runs people off. Where on the flip side, if I look at building a relationship, oftentimes we don't realize that some of the relationships we have are great places to start. Well, what do I mean? So whether you have someone that you went to high school with, college with, happen just to your barber, your stylist, your car set, whoever, those are relationships that matter. Well, you look at that. Well, how might someone I went to high school with benefit me in a relationship today?
Hmm.
Oftentimes, we honestly don't stay in touch with even our closest friends once we get out into the world and everybody's doing their own thing,
Hmm.
and then you realize, well, wait a minute, my I went to high school with such and such who's now in this field, right? Let me just catch up with them and see what's going on, right? I tell
Yeah.
people all the time that I mentor that people always want to help you. And so just because you haven't talked to someone in 5, 10 years doesn't mean it's different than networking. If I was reaching out to that friend from high school because I'm in the sales industry, right? And they
Hmm.
have a title and I want to sell them something, that's not what I'm talking about.
Mm,
I'm talking about genuinely interested in fostering relationships that, hey, you're in a space that I'm in or I'm entering into, or maybe you're in an industry or you're doing something that I want to understand better. Can we chop it up and have a conversation?
okay.
And people value that, right? Why should they entertain you? Why would they give you their time? Well, if they're sharing expertise with you just to help you better understand something, that's different than I haven't talked to this guy in 20 years. He's in a position now where he wants to sell me something because I'm in a position where I can actually buy something.
Yeah.
That comes off differently. So anyway, just getting back to like relationships is sometimes that example of just extending an olive branch, having conversations every once in a while, staying in touch with people, and then fostering those relationships to become more than about work. I don't know how many people I've reached back out to that now we're in points of our lives where we have children. And so we have the same concerns about what's happening. And then it becomes, well, what are you doing in your career now? Well, wait a minute. We have this going on. Would you be interested?
Hmm.
Or I have this going on. Hey, if you ever are open to a change, give me a call.
Okay.
That's different than I've got somebody's business card in my pocket that I talked to at some conference, you
Yeah. Yeah.
know, 2 months ago, right? Those are two
Yeah.
different ways to approach kind of networking relationship building.
So what I'm hearing from you is make it a practice of nurturing all
Yeah,
your relationships on an ongoing basis and a
yeah,
way of being
exactly.
sincerely and genuinely,
Yeah,
and then when it comes time for you to potentially leverage a relationship, there's already a connection there. And
yeah,
you don't have to actually just reach out to somebody for a specific reason because you want something and then
right.
it come off as being insincere.
Yeah, yeah, and one other example, and I'll tell you, I still have to remind myself of this to this day. So, as you introduced me, I'm the VP of IT for Canada,
Yeah.
right? Very close to almost a junior CIO type role in the functions that I'm driving right now.
Hmm.
It was lost to me until a recent conversation with an old friend of mine this past weekend that his uncle, who I know and have met, is a former CIO, right? And it's a relationship based on golf and family and things that we just stay connected with by sharing things on Instagram about golf that are funny.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute, but he's been down the path that I'm plotting, and so I reached out to him and said, hey, I'm dealing with some things. I want to get some feedback from you on how to navigate these spaces.
Hmm.
Hadn't talked to him about his past role as CIO in probably 15 years when I first met him.
Hmm.
But he's been down this path and is on the other side of his career where he's doing some things now that I can see myself doing. And it's a relationship that it wasn't like, what do you want? It's like, okay, sure, right?
Yeah.
And because of what you said, like he's also aware of my career trajectory and how it's pawned out,
Hmm.
that he's not going to insert himself into that path, but he's also there to have a conversation to support it.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
know, yeah,
What you're describing sounds a lot more organic
yeah,
than a
exactly.
lot of people's concept of networking and relationship building.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people think about, and we'll get into this later. I don't want to dig too much because we're going to come back to it. But I think a lot of people think about networking events that are kind of staged
yes,
and set up where everybody's coming with business cards.
right.
You know what I mean? And they've got
Yeah,
a elevator pitch practiced, and it's very orchestrated and
yeah,
contrived.
yeah.
But what you're describing seems a lot richer than that.
It
Uh,
is. Yeah.
yeah.
And there's a place, don't get me wrong, there's a place for those events, right? Because I frequent them myself and kind of at this point in my career. And even just it's always good to stay connected what's happening in the industry and who's out there. But I've learned that there's a specific kind of goal for those type of exchanges,
Yes.
at least for me and probably for the other side too, than what we're talking about in trying to nurturing relationships or just exposing yourself that you might have people in your circle that you're not even aware of
Yeah.
that could help elevate you and give you some advice, give you some pointers
Hmm.
without having to go into a place of a bunch of strangers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a place for it, but it's not the whole picture. It's not the whole pie.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Okay. We'll come back to that. Already giving us some nuggets here,
Yeah.
Jomondre. So appreciate sharing all the wisdom today. But I also want to give the audience a chance to learn a little bit about you
Sure.
and who you are holistically as a person.
Yeah.
So if I ask you this question, just describe to me in the best way possible. Who is Jomondre Frank?
Oh man, and I'm answering that now at 43. That it might be a different answer than 33 than 23, but I generally like to start out because at my core, I'm a country boy from North Carolina. I grew up in southeastern North Carolina. Um, my roots are still there. Majority, my wife and I both families are still there. And I say that because I actually when I went out first generation to go off to let's say 4-year college. Um, Oldest grandchild on both sides of the family. So I would say a lot riding on that or the guinea pig, however you want to look at it.
Okay.
But went off to East Carolina University, 4-year path, and I tell the story because I think it's important. Um, it was one of those things where you're going to go to college. Okay, I'm going to college, right? And that was back then the pathway to kind of make it. Let's say if you want to call it that. Got there and was in an accounting program that kind of had a direct path to go be an accountant when you got out. And I took an assessment my junior year and realized like that's not going to be for me. I'm a little too
Mm.
personal for that. I can't see myself just running numbers every single week and every month and
Okay.
and doing all that. And then started some exploration. Fast forward to make it long story short, ended up this company was there in consulting, Bearing Point at the time. Interviewed with them, got on with them as basically like a junior analyst type resource, and that's what exposed me to IT. But I bring that up because being a country boy from North Carolina, for me at least, I can't speak for everybody. I had never been on a plane, and the first time I got on a plane was with the company that I accepted a job with, that was flying me back and forth from Atlanta to New York essentially for about a year. Had never
Mm.
been on a plane before that, and that was always a pivotal moment for me because I could have said, well, I don't I don't know. That's a little frightful, right? I've never been on a
Yeah.
plane, but I was like, you know what? Let's just take the jump and see what happens. Worst case scenario, I can always quit and leave, right? Like
Yeah.
what's that? And that's kind of how I live a little bit. So the other part of me, I would say, is I'm also open to change. I'm a person that is okay with trying something and realizing that, okay, while I might have committed to it on January 1st, that doesn't mean I can't change my mind on March 31st, right? And pivot to something totally different.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's been a key part of I think my career progression because if you were to look at my path, it will probably look like a zigzag, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
some of the things that I've done in my career, and going back to the relationships conversation we had, the relationships played a huge role in that. Yeah.
Okay.
So country boy from North Carolina, like you mentioned, I'm a huge avid golfer. I play a lot. That mean I'm good, but I play enough. I play well enough to enjoy it. And then I do enjoy my sport bikes. I take to the track. I have an event coming up in a couple of weeks at Road Atlanta. Super excited about that for the first time, first event of the season.
Uh-huh.
And that those things are ways that I take care of my mental health, right? It's I really make time, and I think we're going to get into that a little bit to really
Yeah.
create space for that, so that I don't take on way too much and don't have a way to release some of the stress that as a husband, father, VP, and all that stuff, right? It doesn't just kind of stress you out too much.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You got to have that balance. And yeah, we'll definitely touch on that later because that's
Yeah,
an important part of the journey to being successful is taking care of yourself, right?
absolutely.
Good stuff. So let me ask you this too in terms of because we're talking about relationships. So to get a window into how you
Yeah,
personally relate to other people,
yeah.
I want to ask you when someone is in a relationship with Jamondre,
Hmm.
who are they in relationship with? What can they expect
Yeah.
if somebody is connected to you?
Oh man, that's a great question. I lead. I think I lead a lot with my personality and my personal story, personal situation first, and some people don't, right? I think some people hold that back. And what I mean is, if you're in a relationship with me, you know how passionate I am about my wife, my boys, my golf.
Yeah.
You get to understand who I am outside of work or outside of what you might think of
Yep.
me in corporate more than anything. And I think that then shows up when we do engage in a work scenario, because you have that understanding. I'm a trust first type of person. I know that's also different for a lot of people. I trust until somebody gives me a reason not to. I assume people have great intention. And so I don't lead with this cloak of somebody's being out to get me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if
Yeah.
you're in a relationship with me, that you'll feel that. And if it becomes something different, you'll then feel the distance.
Okay.
But that's kind of how I show up.
Yeah. And so I've heard a couple of things, kind of a little bit of a pattern there because you talked
Yeah,
about trusting people, giving them a chance, and then
yeah,
you let a person's actions dictate from
yeah,
there, right?
yeah.
Um, you're willing to take risk,
Yeah,
calculated risk,
right.
and which it leaves you open, right, to
Hmm.
potentially failure,
Yeah,
disappointment, uh, being hurt by others. You
yeah,
talked about flying everywhere. You hadn't
yeah,
had experience before. You could have said, I'm gonna stay in my comfort zone,
right.
right? Which I'm sure you're gonna hit on that in
Yeah,
terms. staying in your comfort zone versus getting outside of it and the role that plays in succeeding, right?
for sure. Yeah,
Uh, you could have just stayed in your comfort zone, but you were willing to take that calculated risk for potential upside and a potential benefit. And you're
yeah,
approaching relationships the same way,
yeah.
open, give it a chance. If something happens, you're confident in your ability to pivot,
Right.
navigate it accordingly, and not
Yeah,
kind of being guarded and protecting yourself all the time.
yeah.
So, how does that, you being open in that way, how has that affected your career trajectory, and how does that affect a person's opportunities to succeed?
Yeah, so yeah, I'll give my perspective on it, and the people around me and who engage with me may think different. But I think it's done a few things, right? One, it's allowed me to build relationships with a broad spectrum of people in different functions, different walks of life,
Hmm.
different points in their career. That I think we've been able to have reciprocal relationships in our experience sharing, in our sponsorship of one another. Let's say, right, if you have a broad set of relationships, and I have a great experience, let's say with you, Jonathan, like there's no doubt I'm going to give a positive comment about you in a room you may not even be in if your name comes up, right? Um, or defend you if something is coming up that it shouldn't be, and that's for everyone in my circle, right? It's
Hmm.
that's just kind of how I am. So I think it's given me that ability to be very open about who I am, and have a variety of a large network, if you will, of relationships. The benefit of that, I think, has been when opportunities arise, your name may pop up whether you want it to or not.
Mm.
Hey, I hear something's going on over here. Man, I think you should talk to Jomondre or even me. Like, hey, you're talking about X, Y, and Z. I think you should talk to. I'll just use a random name. This is not a person, but I think you should talk to Janet. Janet's great at X, Y, and Z. I know Janet's been working over here. By the way, she just finished this project. You know what I mean? So I
Hmm.
think those things matter, and to the extent where how it's helped in a career. Oftentimes, when transformations are happening or things that are happening in organizations or opportunities, even that a family member might know about where you might be a good fit for before it's ever published to the world, you might get line of sight to it, right? Somebody might think
Yeah.
about you, or even if it is published to the world and you're not aware of it, your expansive network and potential people who can bring something to you, it's a numbers game, right? The more
Yeah.
people that know about you and what you're trying to achieve in your life and what your goals are, the
Yeah.
more people have the opportunity to bring your name up or bring you into things that they might be aware of.
Man, okay. That's really good guidance and really good insight into the value of relationship building and being open
Yeah.
to developing new connections, man. Man, this is a great conversation. So I keep getting off track a little bit because
No, it's all
what
good.
you're giving is so quality, and I want to make sure I mine it and get the most out of it. But definitely want to continue learning a little bit about you as well.
Okay.
So I'm gonna play a little game with you a little bit,
Uh-oh.
if you allow me, if you don't mind. So I'm gonna name some different relationship roles, different
Okay.
types of relationships, and I want you to rate yourself on each one on a scale of 1 to 10, one being terrible, 10 being excellent
Okay.
on yourself. So for example, it's gonna be how good of a blank are you? And the first
Okay.
one might be friend, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna go down the list.
All right.
So first one I'm naming is friend. How good of a
Got it.
friend are you?
Wow. I'm gonna give myself a 8.5.
Oh, well, we're
So
going with 0.5.
yeah, I'm gonna give yeah, because I think there's a story behind that, and it's interesting you mentioned that because I was having a conversation not too long ago with my wife about a definition of a friend.
Oh, wow.
Right. And when I look at the friends that my father, grandfather, mother had growing up, um, to maybe the way my circle show up today, it might not be fair. I'm being honest, give myself an 8.5. Why do I say that? My dad had friends that if he was broke down at 3 in the morning and he had to be at work at 6 and they were 25 miles away, he can call them, they would get up, come get him, even if that meant they would be late to work.
Mm.
If I'm honest, I have to challenge myself. I would love to think I would do that. But I might say, well, let me send you some help. And that's where I'm challenging myself at this point in my life. I really want to nurture my relationships on a different level than I have in the past
Okay.
because it's been easy for me to say, well, I've got so much going on with my family, my boys, my work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You my boy, but am I getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning? So I'm at a
Okay.
point in my life where I'm really challenging, trying to spend more time gaining and closing that last 1.5%
Yeah.
with, say, what I call my friend circle, right? So yeah, I give myself an 8.5
Eight
on
and a
that.
half
Yeah,
because of
yeah,
your reference point. Yeah.
yeah. My reference point, and I think there's a lot of value in that. I've been doing a lot of thinking about, kind of lifestyle environment that my wife and I have been able to build compared to, prior generation that we grew up in, and some of the dependency prior generation might have had on each other.
Hmm.
That today, we can seem like we're so independent and feel like we don't need each other. I think that has actually impacted some friend relationships. So I'm trying to close that gap a little bit, and it's a
Got it.
more personal in that regard. There's probably other things in friendships that I would give myself a 10 on, but I lean a lot on like that when you really, really need me right
Yeah.
now. I'm really thinking about like how will I
In
show
there,
up for my
how we showing up?
people. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Spouse.
Ooh. I'm gonna give myself on a 10 on that one because I will say I work hard on that. Now she may give me a 9.5, I would hope, but I'm gonna give myself a 10 on that because the more than anything, Jonathan, and I mean this with all sincerity, that relationship is the number one relationship in my life. Right. I think
Hear
the
that.
anchoring of husband, wife, spouses is so critical to many things for our direct family, but also then our extended family, how we show up with our friends, how we show up for our boys,
Yep.
and then freeing us to do the things in the world that we both want to do. Right. It's the most important relationship. So I pour into that more than anything.
I hear that. I hear that.
Yeah.
Father.
Oh man, I'm gonna give myself an 8.5 on that. Not because I don't feel like I'm pouring as much into it, because I pour a lot, and I say you know me, right? That is super important to me. But some of it maybe is a hard rating on myself as a man and as a black man around, am I getting my boys ready for the world that they're ahead of? There's certain areas where I feel like I'm 10, 11, 12 knocking it out.
Hmm.
And there's certain areas that I'm like, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah.
And how much rope, should I give them compared to the rope? Now, for example, my boys are 12, about to be 13,
Hmm.
right? Um, and they haven't been exposed to as much stuff as other 12, 13-year olds that I think that matures you faster in some ways for a benefit, but in some ways not. So I worry that as they get ready, and I'm releasing some reins as they get ready to go into this 13-year-old them in eighth grade before high
Hmm.
school, actually to test some things that I feel like I've been teaching them. And
Yeah.
are they learning to navigate those things and that age and where you get into peer pressure and you get into different influences, we lose visibility to how much is going on in their lives outside of the house. I rate myself super hard on that, so I would say 8.5, right? Because there's certain things I was like, man, maybe I should have did that differently, right?
Yeah.
Or let me wait and see. I guess life will be the report card on that.
Ultimately.
Yeah,
Ultimately. Yeah.
but I am all in when it comes to lessons learned here every day at every game possible I can be at. Show teacher conferences, situations calling about what's going on at school. It's not just you're not just talking to my wife, you're talking to both of us. Very intentional about that role because I think that role is super powerful
Yeah.
and will determine, these two people that are growing up in this environment, who do they become?
Yeah.
Because who they become in has the potential to impact a whole another group of relationships,
There
right?
you
So it
go.
can be what cycle do we want to create with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're giving yourself 8.5 and looking at it that way is probably a sign that it's probably higher than that.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I don't, I'm there. I do it, but I'm like, man, I really want. And
yeah.
part of that is also to make sure I don't, I guess, pat myself on the back too
Don't
much on that
relax.
one.
Yeah.
And yeah, and because these phases, man, and the journey that they're going through, and raising two young black men in a predominantly white area plays a factor in that. We made
Yeah.
that choice to be in that area, but at the same time, it adds another layer of, say, fathering that I feel like I have to do
Yeah.
to prepare them for the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know about that. Know about that for sure. Son.
Oh, oh man, you gonna get me now. Uh, man, I'll tell you, in my definition there, that's a relationship I think I could be better at. My mom would say that I was a 10, right? But being 7 hours, 7.5 hours away, I don't get to spend as much, personal time as I would prefer. Like, don't get back home to be there as often as I would love to if I was
Mhm.
closer, and need to be more intentional about that. My mother is getting a bit older. I think some will say that she's young. I'll talk mother and father separately. So I'll talk about my mother. She's in her early 60s and is now doing a lot of care for her parents.
Mhm.
and I can see the toll it's taken on her, and she's doing it willingly. It's no, and she expected this, but it's at that age. And
Yeah.
then now one of the things I'm looking at is how can I be there for her even more, given the distance
Going through the same thing.
yeah, and not
Yeah.
and being able to provide in certain ways financially, but not wanting that just to be the only part of that relationship, right? And we have a really close relationship. It's just not as often as frequent as in person as I would prefer it to be.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I 100% relate to that. My mom's doing
yeah,
the same thing. She's caretaking,
yeah,
primary caretaker for my grandmother,
yeah,
and she's got tons of siblings, but she's the person that is kind of the
yeah,
go-to person.
yeah,
And trying to, how do I support her?
yeah,
As she's going through that and watching her cope with my
yeah,
grandmother going through dementia and getting older and dealing with
right.
health issues and that kind of thing. So I definitely understand what you're talking about there. So you gave
Yeah,
yourself a what?
yeah. I'm gonna give myself an 8 on that one. Right. I want to do better on that one for sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sibling.
Oh my goodness. I think I would go. I'm gonna go about an 8 there because it kind of goes in the same light a little bit for me, right? My sisters are still in North Carolina as well.
Hmm.
My mother's in different parts of North Carolina, but similarly don't get to spend as much time as I would prefer, right? We're talking now about as our kids, we all have children that are about the same age, right? One of my sisters has a son who's a year younger than the boys. Another sister has a daughter a year older, and actually, I have my other sister has children as well, uh, and I don't get to see them that often. Right? We
Yeah.
engage on social media, we engage through text calls, we try to plan an event every year, but don't get to see them nearly as much as I would love to, especially now that we're at these adult ages and we have all these different things we can relate to
Yeah.
as our kids go through the middle school period and get ready for high school. I'll give myself an 8, right? A lot of that I think we'll get to in a bit about, the chase of success or the chase of a career and starting your own
Yeah.
family does have an impact on relationships if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And looking back at it, there probably some things could have been done differently. But I also feel like everything happens for a reason, right? Everybody spawns and has their time, and then now we're finding ourselves kind of coming back, I think, right?
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
as our kids are all at an age that are a bit more independent, and then being able to show up for each other in different ways, celebrate everybody's successes. All the kids are doing great in school, testing and trying different things in sports, and so we're all able to relate and connect on that. And now it's like, how do we get everybody back together to the point where I think it was this past year, we for the first time we took like our first collective trip. We went to Panama City Beach
Hmm.
for the weekend, right? The kids get to hang out, right? Because growing up, I mean, we were around the corner from cousins across the street. You get up every day and you were with your aunts and uncles and cousins and such. And uh, my dad's siblings were there. My mom's siblings, everybody was nearby. And when you move out for opportunity and you do all this stuff, you get your degrees and you move to the city and you do this, is
Yeah.
now it's like you have to work even harder, I think, to retain, nurture, mature those relationships as everybody's lives kind of go in different directions.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And before I go into, I'm gonna go into some professional relationship roles as well and get your ideas on those
yeah,
as we wrap up the personal. But what I've heard and listening to you kind of describe your experiences in each of these personal relationships
yeah,
is life is in stages.
yeah, for
And
sure.
so it's important for us to be able to reassess our relationships going through different stages in terms of what are the needs of the people in my life, and then also what am I
Yeah,
in a position to provide
yeah,
at this life stage?
yeah,
Because we'll be in a stage where we're chasing, trying
yeah,
to grow professionally and pushing. A
yeah,
lot of our time and attention might shift to that, and we might spend less time with the people in our personal lives. But
yeah,
do we are we keeping an eye on it, and do we, as that chapter turns,
yeah.
are we willing to kind of shift attention and say, okay, now my kids are older. I do have more
Right.
time. I don't really have that excuse anymore. How do I make that a priority to
Yeah.
spend more time with my siblings and my parents and the people that we kind of neglected a little bit in order to
Yeah.
pursue our own stuff, right?
Yeah. And I think being mindful and aware of where you are in those phases, and it goes to the idea of the term work-life balance, that
Yeah.
is a facade, that it's all things equal.
Yeah.
I even call it life balance. There's moments in your life where your relationship with your spouse is going to need more attention than a relationship even with your children. The relationship with your
Yeah.
children may need more attention than a relationship with your siblings and your
Yeah.
parents. Even for your parents, their relationships now, I mentioned my mom, she's spending a lot more time with her parents to get them to doctor's appointments and such where they are compared to even us at times. and that's okay. But I think sometimes we don't think about it like that, and we can take it personal, depending on what side of relationship you're on.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you don't have time for me anymore, right?
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
I invite you to events 2 years in a row, so I'm gonna stop inviting you because you never come. Not realizing I've got 2 year olds, bro. I've got
Yeah.
twins at that, and I would love to come to that event, but maybe we already have something planned. But you don't, if it's not thought about, if it's not spoken, if it's not something you socialize, then the relationship could be, hurt by that at times. Yeah. But it's something that we're very mindful of, right? The balance piece, because you need at certain points you need to give your finances more focus, right? There's
Yeah.
there's only a certain number of years we have here. And that even that space where you have the energy to chase is finite.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that momentum you may garner is finite. And so being honest about where you are in those periods of your life and being aware of it can then help shape, manage, keep your mental health in check and not feel as guilty about things. It doesn't go away, but know that you're making that decision for that moment to invest your energy in certain places. But I'm thinking about it this way. Even if something like working out, every year, New Year's, right? The gyms are packed. Before a period, however long you do it or sustain it, you have to prioritize that and give up something else,
Yeah.
right? Maybe you're not going out on the weekend and having a big dinner on Saturday night like you used to, because for that period you're focused on changing something.
Yes.
And that might be a short period, but then other places, if you have a goal to build a business, right? Entrepreneurs that may watch this, or if you, that in your life, you've seen them and see them how it's 24/7,
Yeah.
and they may not be able to show up for everything, right? During the period where they're building that business. When it gets to another
Mhm.
stage of that business, you might then say, I see them everywhere. They don't work because
Yeah.
they've now invested all that energy. So anyway, I can ramble on about that, but I think that's important.
Yeah.
Even in the relationship stages we're talking about, if you're focused on building relationships intentionally, there's a certain level of energy required to do so. Right?
Yes.
There's a certain level of commitments, planning it out in the future if you truly want to invest in relationships bigger and broader than just one outcome, right?
Yeah.
I want to sustain a relationship no matter what benefit or not it gains me. I want to sustain this relationship. So
Yeah. And prioritizing it,
exactly.
and being proactive and intentional about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So I'm gonna go, we're gonna go professional relationships.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna ask you about several hats here.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go rapid fire, and then I want you to take the opportunity to kind of reflect on all these different professional roles
Yeah.
and just kind of give me your overall assessment of it, from your perspective, if that's okay.
Yep.
All right. So you're still rating yourself employee.
10. And it's crazy. I think most of these gonna be higher than the personal. Isn't that sad? but but
Th- I'm actually watching for that. I'm
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
actually watching for that. So
yeah,
I'm gonna see how it turns out.
yeah, yeah.
Colleague,
Colleague, 10,
leader,
10,
follower.
9. Because depending on what I'm following, I may or may not be fully on board at times. But I can get there if I get a better understanding. I'm not, it's gonna be blanket. Yeah,
Got it. Got it.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Mentor.
10. I'm very passionate about that. Well, it's crazy that I just said that so quickly and I gave myself 8.5 as a father, because of how hard I rate myself. But I feel and I look at I'm at a point in the mentoring relationships where I've been able to see what I point into people and see things happen and see the outcome. So I
Yeah.
feel more confident and positive about what I've done because I've seen it 8, 9, 10, 11 times. The
Got it.
boys are coming along, and I will see it at some point. I've seen some good things from earlier, but I'm waiting to see that adult version of them, which is years away.
That's fair. You
Yeah,
gotten more feedback on the mentor.
yeah, yeah.
Mentee.
Mentee. Oh, that's a good question. I would wonder how my mentors would rate that. Um, I'm gonna give myself the 8.5 there. Right. I
Okay.
think there's some things I could do there to continue to make sure I'm giving a reciprocal nature in that as much as I do nurture those relationships for things when I don't really need anything. There's probably some times where I could make sure that if there's anything else they need,
Hmm.
you know what I mean?
Yep.
Um, because we're often just checking in, catching up, which is
Hmm.
great, but I can check in to see if there's anything they need.
Got it. Sponsor.
Sponsor, uh, 9. I think there's opportunity for improvement there. I'm very strong and passionate about advocating for people when they're not in the room. hard rater because I'm always thinking like, what else can I do? Right. Especially in oftentimes where you aren't that final decision maker when you're trying to sponsor someone. Is there any other levers that could be pulled to strengthen the sponsoring that I'm doing on behalf of people?
Okay. Advocate.
10. I think I'm a pretty good advocate for folks. Actually, let me take that back. I'll go 9.
Okay.
always think there's room for where I maybe could advocate even more so, right? Because I'm always thinking, what more? Yeah, maybe it's a man thing. I was talking to my wife about men versus women earlier today, actually this morning. It's like it feels like there's always more that I can do, right? In that space, right? What else could I do to be a bigger advocate for people?
Got it.
Yeah.
Servant, serving others, serving the community.
Yeah, I would give myself a 9 there. Again, I think there's always more that I could do, but there's almost no space. And what I mean is, I'll put it this way: out in my hierarchy of prioritization, right? And talking about my spouse, my boys, my family, work, mentees, and all of that. I always feel like there's more that I could be doing, let's say, in the community at large. But the priority I've put around the impact that I could make in my mind so far has been on the individual level versus a mass organization type level, if that makes sense.
Got it.
But I think there's a place for that coming up in some of my phases of life now as the boys have gotten older. Me and my
Yeah.
wife actually talked about that and ways we can give back on a larger scale,
Yeah.
and do some things differently. Yeah.
And that might just be one of those seasons, you know,
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
that season hasn't come yet, but everything
Yeah.
that you're doing up until now is
Yeah.
preparing you for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we even talked about it in one of the organizational discussions a while back, where you think about your life trajectory and maybe what you focus on your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, and you get to that point where you start seeing the horizon coming and
Yep.
you've maybe hit some goals that you've had for yourself. And now you think about, okay, what else can I do and offer now? With the 20 years of corporate experience that I have, I use that in mentorship a lot with family members, with friends and mentees, and then looking out and saying, now I understand what my purpose, I'm a little closer to what my purpose in life is,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? How can I impart and bring that passion to an organization or a group of people or a person that could benefit from that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the last one, citizen.
Citizen. I give myself a 9 on that. Again, it ties into, I think, to advocacy, to sponsorship, and some other things, right? Because to me, I think about citizenship not directly what I can do for the country, but I bring that down to where I interact day in and day out, right? Am I being a
Yeah.
great citizen for the community I live in? What does that mean? I coach a lot of youth sports, right? In my way, that's being very strong in that, right? Spending a lot of times, I mean, over the years, I probably can count hundreds of kids I've had the pleasure of coaching and having hopefully a positive impact on, by way of being engaged and showing up for them. But on the other side, there's other things that I'm sure we can get involved with things that really matter, to me personally.
Yeah.
So I always leave a little room for improvement there. And again, stages of life, I think, are going to allow for that, right? My coaching days are coming to an end as the boys get a little bit older.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know
Yeah.
what? I just want to sit back and be dad now. And I love seeing all the kids that I've had the pleasure of coaching grow up and come by and say, hey, coach, and that kind of thing. But now I think it's going to create some space and time to focus that energy and extra time we have in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, man. Love that. And as you predicted, your pattern of rating
Yeah.
much higher on the professional
Yeah.
roles than the personal. And do you think that that's because you get more feedback on the professional side, like you were talking about earlier, versus some of the stuff is just kind of like going to be proven down the road in your personal relationships, or is your standard just higher for yourself on a personal level?
Man, I think it might be a little bit of both. And I never thought about it until as you were going through the rating. I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting because I know how I'm going to rate myself on the other side should he ask those questions. And not having thought about it until now, I think there's some truth in both of those, right? I'm definitely a harder rater, on the personal level. And
Hmm.
I probably rate myself higher at work than I probably should, you know. But that's my glass half full, always positive thinking. I've had some success in the career, not looking back and just patting yourself on the back, but okay, some proof in the pudding a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Every couple of years getting new opportunities and some realm of success in most of those, right? And continuing to progress,
Yeah.
having that proof in the pudding. And then, as I mentioned, with the personal relationship, there's always that woulda, shoulda, coulda, right? And am I doing enough? Because my bar or my reference point we talk about a lot is so high
Hmm.
And what I've even documented at times in the past years of how do I define success as a husband? How do I define success as a father, as a
Hmm.
son, as a brother is probably unattainable to be honest. But I've set some pretty high targets there. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe not giving yourself enough credit for, because you talked about proof is in the pudding,
Yeah.
which it's much easier to measure when you know, I've progressed in my professional life. So you look at
Yeah.
the level you are, right? You look
Yeah.
at, there's measurable,
True.
tangible
Yeah.
evidence of the return on investment in your
Yeah.
professional life. And then maybe we don't get as much feedback from people in
Yeah.
our personal lives about how we're doing.
Yeah.
People don't
Yeah.
take the time to tell their
Yeah.
kids how good of a son they are, their brother how
Yeah.
good of a sibling, and even
Yeah.
spouses don't. We don't probably don't give each other positive feedback
Yeah.
enough as
Yeah.
from that regard. So you don't have enough tangible evidence. But if you look at the proof is in the pudding, right? And you look
Yeah.
at how are your boys doing? Are
Yeah.
they well adjusted? Are they happy? Well
Right.
provided for? Wife, if you look
Yeah.
at that evidence,
Yeah. True.
you're probably a little higher than you think. But
Yeah.
you're looking at it from, and guys, we're probably notorious for this.
Yeah.
Looking down the road, and because our ultimate goal is to make sure they can provide for themselves when it comes to kids.
Yes.
Can
Yeah.
they take care of themselves? Are they good husbands and fathers,
Right.
good citizens, and all these different roles that we talked about? And that's to
Yeah.
be determined.
Yeah.
But in the moment,
Right.
they're doing pretty well. So
And you're spot on with what you just said about the rating and the feedback. And it's something as I again thinking about in this moment, we do a lot in this house, and I didn't even equate it to that until we just mentioned it, right? Of the power of edification, the power of feedback, but holding each other accountable when something any one of us in this house is off base, and creating a space where we can have those conversations so we can adjust,
yeah,
right? And taking that for what it is and not taking it personal. And that's a learning, I think, for all of us at different phases, because sometimes it come off as I used to say, after all I do, this is what you got to say. And sometimes we can
I
take
feel
one,
that. I
yeah,
feel that
sometimes
though.
sometimes we can take one demerit as a blanket for our overall performance,
Yes.
because you don't have anything else to balance it against, because all we hear is what we didn't do or where we fell short. Yeah.
We make more mention
Yeah.
of the constructive stuff than we do
Correct.
providing
Yeah.
the positive feedback, because that's bare minimum. That's what you're supposed to be doing
Right.
anyway, right?
Right. Yeah. Which is a dangerous level too if you're not careful, right? Because sometimes again our bar of what we should do is so high
Yes.
that being compared against is insane. Or the bar we're being compared against, or we compare ourselves against, is from some other relationship in our life, positive or
Oh,
negative, that
it's a big one.
could be adding a whole ton of weight, to the point of, even I know this is about relationships and career, to the point that we can put so much emphasis, and I think I did this early in my career too, on that career, the other relationships are impacted by it, right?
Yes.
And you're chasing something that you think is going to be so great for the family, and most times it is. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I've been blessed and to have a really good career,
Hmm.
um, but there probably were pockets of time investment where the other relationships are hurt, and trying to go back now and rebuild those is like, can you, right? Or how do you?
How
Because
do you? Yeah.
everybody's now at a different phase in their life. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? To your point, and we've talked about this, right? In terms of being a parent
Yeah.
and your kids, the amount of time we spend with our kids in their childhood years from,
Hmm.
0 to 18 when they
Yeah.
graduate from high school is so much greater than
Yes.
the time we spend with them after
Mhm.
that. We
But what
have
are
to,
we doing? But what are
what are
we
we
doing in those?
doing with that time?
Yeah.
What are we doing with that time? Or how much are we making a
Yeah.
priority to pour into them
Yeah.
in the phase of their life where they're going to spend the most time with us,
Yeah.
so that they're equipped for that
Right.
remainder
Yeah.
over 18, right?
Yeah.
And then
And most of
also them coming back to us later down the line, like how many parents, oh, my kids never come see me, they don't spend any time with me.
yeah.
Did you nurture and build that connection and that
Right.
relationship
Yeah.
to the point where they would feel inclined to come back to you, have a relationship with you, ask you for advice, spend time with you? If
Yeah.
you neglect that first period up front, then
Yeah.
that backside can have a lot of things going
Yeah.
negatively on the back end.
Yeah. And that comes down to the goal setting and what we call what's the phrase? I didn't come up with it. lifestyle design, right? And part of the different phases you go into, what life do you want to have in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, to the point about the kids coming back.
Hmm.
One of the things in the way we actually even parent and discipline and mother and father our boys is with that in mind. Now, that doesn't mean I'm super passive with them and I don't hold them accountable, but
Hmm.
there's going to be certain things that maybe generations prior to us would do that we're just not going to do
Yeah.
because we've seen and talked to enough people impacted by that approach to know the ramifications of it. Now, could it turn into other ramifications? We'll see. That's the 8.5%. But it's like, one of my measuring sticks is going to be, do they want to come home
Yes.
without feeling like they have to come home?
There you go.
Let's say they start their families, are they going to be excited to introduce us to their partners or to build a relationship pool and ecosystem that they want us a part of? Are they
Yes.
going to see us as the grandparents they want around versus ones like, hey, don't take your children there, right? Like, and so all of that goes into how we show up and parent and father. And again, because the relationships with our boys from when we young and first starting to talk to now is as important to us as any relationship we have,
Yeah.
right?
You
It's
know, a big factor in that too is traditions, like family
true.
traditions and
Yeah,
rituals.
yeah,
Those are things that can give the kids a reason to
yeah,
kind of come back and stay engaged
yeah.
as time goes on, because you have these things that this is we as a family, we do this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Every year, every whatever, this is what we do, whether it's going on a vacation, whether it's holiday
right,
dinner, Sunday dinner,
yeah,
whatever it might be, keeping those things established and then passing them down to where
right,
your kids do it with their family is a good way to keep those connections strong too.
yeah.
All right, man. Great conversation. Yeah, I learned a lot about you in that little
Man,
Q&A.
I almost forgot that we were on a podcast and not just talking.
It started to feel that way. It started to
Yeah.
feel that way. Yeah, yeah. A couple more questions before we move on to the next topic. So, in which relationship role do you think you need the most improvement of the ones we just went through?
Oh my goodness. Uh, I would say son and sibling, right?
And why?
It is the way I measure how I define what good looks like. There is a lot of like time spent
Okay.
together, and if I count it up, it's just not where I would want to be. Now, the I understand the phases of life dictate a lot of that,
Hmm.
but at the end of the day, we decide what we do at our time, right? And so I think there's an area where I can spend a little bit more, a good bit more investing in that. And there's some conversations with the family that's already started to get us there or to get me there, but now executing on that plan, right? Like you mentioned that we started some annual vacations, we started some things with uh, before COVID, man. We used to, and this was a part of it. Me, my mom, and sisters would go out for Thanksgiving dinner ourselves after the traditional. So there was a traditional big family thing, and then the night after, we would get dressed up and go to a restaurant we none of us had ever been to, and really just sit down with each other and have a really good time and enjoy that moment for a minute. Because we knew once the weekend was over, who knew when we were going to see each other again? Because when the kids were younger, Christmas up until and even up until this past year, Christmas was home. Thanksgiving
Yeah.
we might do elsewhere, but Christmas was home.
Yeah.
Um, and Christmas is 3 days before my mother's birthday. All right. I got a wife now, Mother's Day. Well, that's the first one I need to take care of, but my mom is also super important to me too. So anyway, there's a lot of things there that plays into that for the right reasons. But
Yeah.
now I look at where we are now, what relationships are we nurturing? How are we nurturing them? And where do we want them to go collectively? Yeah.
Yep. So let me ask you this. What relationships do you think have the greatest impact on a person's life?
Ooh, man, I would take the ones closest to them first and foremost. So you're, no matter who you're close to, like I'll say if you've got a core group of friends that are like your ride or die, huge impact on your life to the point where it can dictate what you will and won't do in terms of career opportunities, right? If you have relationships so strong, let's say you live in Metro Atlanta, but an opportunity presents itself in Charlotte, but you don't want, or no, I go farther, DC.
Hmm.
Great. I mean, could take you and check a lot of boxes. You might not even take that opportunity because of that pool of relationships if they're not supportive of your growth in the way that you are, right?
Okay.
Because some relationships want to, not in a bad way, just keep you near them. Like they're like, man, like you my dog. I don't want to see you go,
Right.
even
Yeah.
if it's just a flight, even if it's a short flight away.
Hmm.
The others I think are super important is who you marry. Is so I'm talking about let's
Ooh.
say friend. Who you marry is super important or impactful. Are they of the same not that we have to be the same, right? Because opposites do attract. Are you supportive of one another, right? Are you holding each other back because both of you are super aggressive in your goals, which some of those are just things that come about, right? Both of me and my wife both have goals that we're chasing. How are you supporting each other during those periods, right? I could be chasing something that requires a lot more time away from what needs to be done at home. Like, especially if I'm chasing something that after my 9 to 5, 3 or 4 times a week, I need to go do something.
Hmm.
That could become like you're never home, bro. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing if there's not an understanding of how that's going to benefit the family or benefit the relationship, and vice versa?
Yeah.
And then the other grouping, of course, is I know you asked me which one's the most, but even this, so it just depends on where your strongest relationships are, right? So if it's in your group of friends or is it with your spouse, and let's say if you happen to be in an industry or work environment that you spend so much time there every week, if that environment is conducive or not to who you want to be and how you want to be, all those things matter to the energy and where you spend it, to what you think is possible in your life, to what you think is available to you or not in that company or in that industry or in that space.
Yeah.
So depending on which, I guess I said all that to say, depending on where your strongest relationships lie, I would just say evaluate them, and are they supportive of where you're trying to go, or are they holding you back?
Yeah, man, I'm 100% tracking with what you're saying too, especially when you mentioned obviously friends, because we tell our kids that all the time. You got to watch who you
Yeah,
watch who you hang with.
yeah,
Watch who's in your circle, man. You need
yeah,
people positive, somebody that's supportive. You
yeah,
need people that are probably better than you in certain areas that you can lean on and learn from, right?
yeah,
Um, and having people not being the smartest person in your circle or
yeah,
not being the most successful person in your circle is something to be mindful of too.
yeah,
And then spouse.
yeah.
Who was I can't remember if it was I want to say it was either like maybe Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, but somebody did
Mhm.
mention about your spouse, your being one of the most important
Important
decisions you
decision.
will make in your
Yes,
life to your overall success in life is who you
yes,
choose as a spouse.
yeah,
And I see that over and over again,
yeah,
talking about their spouses not being supportive
yeah,
of their goals and what they're trying to achieve. I see it on
yeah,
both sides.
yeah.
Sometimes it's men
Hmm.
egos
Yes, yes, big time.
they're tripping over their wives because their
Mhm.
wives are, passing
Yeah,
them up
yeah,
and not, not supporting their wives and maybe even trying to hold them back because they feel insecure as men
huge.
when their wives are taking off. I
Yeah.
see that quite a bit.
Yeah, that's facts, and that's why I think that the communication, and you hear it everywhere. Communication is important, but how to communicate. It's not what you say, how you say it. It's how often are you sitting down and having those check-ins about where we are as a family and where we're going, what's important to you. Here's what's important to me. I know this may be different now than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. I want to pour some time into a passion that I have. You may or may not even know I had this passion, depending on how open you've been with your spouse. You know, and here's why. I think that's
Yeah.
that's super important, and just learning or maybe even relearning how to have those conversations as adults,
Yeah.
right? In the workplace, some of those are structured, crucial conversations or structured moments to talk through things. Or hey, here's what's going to happen. And it's like, oh, this is work. Here's why I know I need to have it. I need to listen and process and make change.
Yeah.
We got to bring that same thing or make sure that same thing is happening, maybe in a different way, into our other relationships, right?
Yeah.
How open and honest can I be with my spouse?
Ooh. Ooh.
How open and honest can I be with my friend,
That's
right? Because
that's the thing though,
yeah,
because a lot of people avoid the conversations because it's going to start a fight.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
how's the person going to respond? Are they going to get mad, roll their
yeah,
eyes? They're not listening, they're on their
right,
phone. And it brings up all these emotional things
yeah,
because they don't have a good communication style. They
yeah,
haven't worked on it. They don't make it a priority to actually set aside time when people aren't upset or busy to have
right,
conversations about these things,
yeah,
not setting expectations. Like if you take a new job, what is that going to mean for the family? Right.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Man. All right, man. Good stuff. Man, we could talk for days, but
yeah.
I know I definitely want to keep us moving because eventually we're going to get to the next topic is relationship building tips. So we definitely want to cover that. Last question I want to ask before we shift to the relationship building skills.
Okay.
Who in your life has been most instrumental to your success and why?
hope this don't sound corny, but it's been my wife. And I'll tell you why. So we started dating in college. We were kids, right? Me and my wife are about to celebrate uh, 19 years in April, married, and we were together 5 years prior to that. And along that journey, that's when neither one of us had nothing but some goals in college.
Hmm.
Not even dreams, right? We both come from a background of, say, maybe being in an environment where you didn't have everything you might have wanted all the time, but you always had enough, right?
Hmm.
But knowing that there was more out there. Our parents worked super hard to provide for us, never wanted for nothing, always had what we needed and even some what we wanted. But we always, of course, always want more. You can't help it. And then once we got our degrees and got out into the workplace on our own, right? We started living together in college. Coming from the South, that was shunned upon, just to say the least, before marriage. But we got out of college and got married. But that was when we started working and had our first house and started to really dream. Say, okay, we're out here as kids, we can actually do this.
Yeah.
Now we broaden our horizons to what's possible. And at that time, before kids, is when we really started to dream, and we had some open lines of communication about my glass half full part of the world, and being a little bit more okay with risk, and her being a bit more risk avoidant, to
Yeah.
understand that, hey, I will never put us in a position to be out on the street. Right. And giving that protection and comfort and understanding that I'm not going to do anything that you're not aware of. Definitely not doing anything illegal. That was never a question.
Right.
Right. But even, testing out some businesses early on, or making career shifts and changes, I was okay with. And she's like, wait a minute, what? You want to do what? Like, so having those dialogues. But anyway, that she's been the most impactful, because she's always been there and been that sounding board and been that support system and being that champion for anything that I've wanted to do. And now we're at a point in our career where and we had kids young. We did some planning early on where she was able to stay home for 2 years, right? And financially, we were able to save up, and we started that planning discussion in college before we ever got out. And then once we had kids, another set of dreams, transpired. We don't want them to get out of college and with a lot of debt. So that started planning, and a lot of what I've done in my career and the discussions we've had has built a lifestyle design that we've made decisions to try to get us there. Hadn't always been perfect, right, on the way, but that's been a part of it. So that relationship has been huge in my success.
Yeah, man. And I want to commend you for acknowledging that, because a lot more wives need to hear that.
Hey, and I'm straight up. Someone's like, yeah, he's supposed to say that. I'm dead serious, because it was only later, right, Jonathan, that the mentors in my life really started to show up, right? I would say when I think about true mentors that helped really take where I thought I was driving my career, and then I realized the relationship pools what drove it.
Mhm.
I was probably in it was, mm, early 30s, early mid 30s, right? So there was a lot of time when we were together doing some things that was just us laying the foundation and
Yeah.
making things possible and what we're looking at. And then I'll say mid 30s, I started taking those relationships serious. Okay, wow, this is what it really means to have a mentor, a sponsor, a coach, a board of directors, if you will, helping steer your career. The power of building relationships and not just networking. Mid to late 30s. Well, I'll say, yeah, mid 30s, and really saying, okay, this is how this is done. And
Yeah.
having some people point me in the right directions, exposing me to different ways of thinking, uh, ways to go about navigating your career, how to have conversations of where you are based on where you want to be with people who can actually impact that change to get you there.
Yeah.
But before that, and even through that, and even now, it's been her.
He was there.
Yeah, yeah.
He was there. I love that. I love that, man. Love to hear more of that too. Is there anybody who's had a negative presence in your life,
Hmm.
but it helped you grow and become more successful?
Yeah. Oh man. Yes. um, and I think it was unbeknownst to him as my father. And I think many people might have a story, and I think mine is shifting over time. But the story I told myself about why I didn't have the tight knit relationship with him that I'm building with my boys is what drove me to build a relationship I'm building with my boys. Right? He's always there and around. Uh, Great man. But when I look back at what the way I define success as a father is time spent, right? He was busy working, right? He would be at the games, but like in the weekends, he was working oftentimes. And I remember vividly the one time, and in my mind, the one time we played catch, I can remember it just like it was yesterday, right? In the front yard of my where I grew up. He had on his gray work pants, his brown dirty boots, and his shirt that had his name on it from work. Because it was one evening I got home, and I don't know if he had promised me that morning and finally did it or what, but like before he did anything else that day, we played catch, right? So I share that because it also shapes and drives a lot of how I'm in a relationship with my wife based on what I saw with him and my mother growing up,
Hmm.
how he parented us, which uh, again for me as the one son he had, I look back and had different expectations that now I want to make sure my boys have. You know what I mean? Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah.
And then even how I did say, you know what, I don't ever. It's funny. We have this thing saying that Frank men are cheap, except for what we really enjoy. We spend money on our toys, but everything else gets a question mark. So a lot of when I was growing up, it was like, man, if I ask for money, he's just gonna say no. So in my career, a lot of my push and passion to say earn a certain amount of drive to a certain level to be able to support my family was around never wanting to have to ask anybody for anything.
Hmm.
And so I think those are just a few examples of how that relationship kind of pushed me. Let's say even he probably didn't even know it, pushed me into and had me live my life in a certain way. That's got me to this point.
Gotcha. And I
Yeah,
appreciate you being willing to be open about that.
yeah,
Because it's, I think we all have some relationships that might not have been what we expected them or wanted them to be,
yeah,
but it's what we can take from those. There's things we can take from those that are
yeah,
beneficial to us going forward, as well as the ones that are supportive. So
yeah.
that's the reason I asked that question.
And what's crazy about that too is I am him, right? In terms of like being relational. And I remember
Hmm.
earlier about the friend that he is and the friend circle that he has, and while I'm
Hmm.
looking at that and all that, he just like me, he can walk in any room and strike up a conversation. He knows people from everywhere. He can relate to almost anybody from any city. He's traveled a lot.
Hmm.
And it's very personable. And I think, and it's crazy how genetics work and how that works, because that is me. As much as I talk about maybe wanting to spend more time,
Yeah.
right? One on one, like I do with the boys, and sitting down to have dinners and going to the movies or going to sporting events and all that. Again, I know I didn't have my boys until I was near 30. Him and my mom had me at 18. So as an adult, I can appreciate that nuanced difference in what they had to focus on in their 20s.
Yeah.
And I was at a different point when I had them at 30. So I think about now the boys when I was taking them to places when they were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Like I was well into my 30s and at a different point in my life even. So
Yeah.
looking back at it now, I can appreciate that and look at it differently. But
Yeah.
still, it definitely directly played into how I've navigated fatherhood and being a husband and even how I pursue certain things for work.
Yeah. And I like how you factored in looking back and understanding the person's circumstances, life stage,
For sure.
and everything, and factor that into your
Yeah.
interpretation
Yeah.
of that experience.
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. So next, man, first of all, thanks for giving us a chance to get to know you a little bit
Yeah, yeah.
and being as open as you are, because I think it's important to understand you as a person and how relationships have affected you.
Yeah.
As we get into you giving tips, we want to understand how you function and tick as a person
Yeah.
in relationships too. So thank you for doing that. So next,
Yeah.
we're definitely going to go into some relationship building tips,
Okay.
get some nuggets and get some advice from you if that's okay.
That's fine. That works for me.
All right. When it comes to relationship building, both personally and professionally,
Mhm.
because I think sometimes the personal relationship building affects the professional as well, right?
Correct.
So,
Yep.
so what do you think prevents some people from developing healthy and beneficial relationships?
Oh man, I think it's maybe twofold. Well, if I can go many different ways. I think one, the focus on it and the intentionality behind it, I would say, um, is if it's not seen as highly as valuable as it is, then we don't tend to put the priority on that like we might put on some other things. If we looked at relationships as beneficial as going to the gym, right, to our health or changing our diet, on the impact that it can have on our life, then we probably prioritize it more. So say what holds us back, I think could be some of that. The other piece I think is often feeling like I'm asking somebody for something. That's why it goes into the relationship building versus networking.
Hmm.
Um, the perception of what building a relationship looks like could even hold us back, right? Oh
Yeah.
man, I got to do that, but like, what am I trying to get out of it versus, really truly building a relationship.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the last thing is like who we're building relationships with, and that's you can build relationships with many different people for many different reasons. But if you're building it for a very selfish reason, that could then lean into the other thought around, well, I don't want to feel like I'm begging for something, and then I don't see it as valuable as changing my diet or working out or something like that. So it comes down to what we want to get out of it and how we view it. I think really holds us back at times.
Okay. Okay. So something came to mind as I was listening to you. So intentionality.
Yes.
When I think about intentionality behind relationship building, this is maybe just me, but
Mhm.
I get the impression just from my experience that most of us pick up habits, good or bad, about
Yeah.
relationship building through life,
Yep.
like growing up from the people around us.
Yep.
There's not really a school for relationship
Yeah.
building in terms of
No.
teaching practices, right?
Yeah.
And you absorb what's around you in terms of the habits, and they could be
Yeah.
good habits, they could be bad habits.
Yeah.
So you kind of become subject to how well the people around you build relationships in terms of your own
Absolutely.
behavior and habits.
Yeah.
So if you're somebody who's come up and picked up bad relationship habits,
Yeah.
how do you transition and pivot out of that to develop better habits?
Yeah, and that's a good one too, because I think it's you can't be what you can't see, right? And like many things, right? And we look at, well, I eat this way because my family ate this way, and this is the same thing I cook, right? Or we only do this as a people, or my family is only known to be this way. You got to kind of break that narrative and be open to, well, yes, that's how we've done it, but I want to try it differently. And that's why I think expanding and being open to different relationships helps, because you start to see that, wait a minute, this person doesn't expect this from me as a part of this relationship, whereas everybody else had this different expectation of me,
Mm-hmm.
or vice versa. No, this person has a different definition of what it means to be friends with me, and I'm not holding up to that measuring stick, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I should. And it gives you some perspective on, okay, wait, now what does that mean? I really value this relationship. If that means then I need to make sure we make time for, I use spouse as an example, every other week having a date night for
Mm-hmm.
just us, and then having one the opposite week as a family,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or certain friends, hey, let's get together over lunch every few weeks, right? Like that. That to me is okay. We got to plan and schedule that, make that known, because it's not just that you and that friend get together for lunch. You got to block that time of your day, right? Help for me. I even let my wife know when I have those on the calendar, because she might be thinking we can go somewhere ourselves, and so making sure that it's seen and understood that it's an investment of time for a reason in certain relationships
Mm-hmm.
that you have to be a part of. And so breaking that narrative and really showing up differently is a big part of it, especially if you hadn't seen good examples, depending on your upbringing. I know in the past, at least when I grew up, I was able to see my mom and her girlfriend's relationships and what was important. My dad and some of his male friendships and what that looked like, hanging out, showing up for each other at events, helping each other work on cars.
Mm-hmm.
Um, hey, can you swing by? I need help taking this, putting this starter on the truck. Like, and whatever that looks like for everybody else, you see that. And in some cases, you may not. It may come across as, here's so and so calling to bother me again or beg me for something. And
Mm-hmm.
then you start to expect that when people call you and ask really for help or for advice, and it's not even seen as you can't even see yourself giving that to them because of how you perceive relationships. So I think it's being open and being willing to see it differently.
Okay. Okay. How often do you think people's relationship baggage affects them in the workplace?
Often, I think it shows up often, because at the end of the day, we are still people, just in a different environment, right? I think the view of someone, if you've had an experience with someone, let's say in a position of power, authority, control, and that relationship history has never been great, then why do we think it's going to be seen any different in a corporate environment, right? Whether that's a father figure, an uncle, uh, a former boss, a
Mm-hmm.
principal, a counselor at a college, whatever. And if it's always seen with this power dynamic that you have no control over, then that comes with you.
Mm-hmm.
Vice versa, if it was a mutual relationship, you expect that in the corporate environment. Oh, my relationships with people who've been in these positions have always been consultative, has always been coaching like, mentoring like. So you might lean into that. And
Mm-hmm.
so those reference points I think are huge in
Okay.
how it shows up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So some people are maybe a little skeptical when it
Yeah.
comes to the workplace. and relationships in the workplace.
Hmm.
They might have a mindset that companies just kind of want to use you. They don't really care about you personally. And that person might put up boundaries or walls
Yeah,
between in their workplace relationships.
yeah,
And some people have different philosophies about what they would call blurring lines between work
yeah,
and personal.
yeah.
Do you think developing strong personal relationships with people at work is a
Hmm.
good thing or a bad thing, and why?
Yeah. I personally think it's a great thing. Now, I understand though I'm different maybe in that I might be a minority, but I'll tell you why I think that. And not that, especially in this day and age, in the environment we live in, the economic state that we're in, the globalization of the world, you name it, seeing layoffs happen and all that, right? All that inclusive. I still think that it's great to have personal relationships for a couple different reasons. We spend so much time with these people day to day anyway. Why wouldn't we? Right? Having, I think, interpersonal relationships helps with the mental health aspect. Right? You might be going through something that the whole phrase of everybody we interact with every day is going through something that we know nothing about. Right? And if you build personal or interpersonal relationships with people, there's empathy. Right? That if somebody shows up one day and they just seem off, they missed a deadline, they turned in some work product or did something that wasn't up to par like you used to, it's easier to have some empathy and understand that, okay, well, that's different, right? What's happening? Versus if we're just colleagues that work together, it's going to be, in my opinion, and actually not in my opinion, I've seen it, a bit more of this. I did my thing, you ain't do yours, right?
Mm,
Well, you're the reason why. And that can still happen with relationships, but I think it creates a bit more of a collaborative environment that if I have to come to somebody to have a relationship with that I know their kids play baseball or their daughter is in gymnastics or they have a son who's battling an illness that really takes up the time. They're a caregiver to the elderly in their family.
mm-hmm,
Then when I'm interacting with something, I should at least take that into account when I go to them about something that might need to be constructive. Or better yet, when I know they poured in extra time to make something happen for us, I should be thinking, wow, I know what's going on in their life a little bit to know that for
hmm.
them to pull that off, they've really had to sacrifice.
So,
So I
so
think that
go ahead.
yeah, no, and I share that just to say like because to me, if you get to know a little bit about people and let them know a bit about you, what moves you,
Hmm.
what's important to you, what you prioritize in your life, not only that you can work better together as a leader, then I can make sure I'm mindful of that. If I'm speaking from a leadership perspective, right?
Yes.
If I think about my teams that I'm leaving or when as I was progressing my career, it was important for me to let my leaders know how passionate I was at certain phases of my career of being there for my boys. And a
Hmm.
few I told exactly why. As a black man, it's very important that I show up to school events. It might just seem like a thing to say, hey, I'm not gonna be here till afternoon on a Wednesday because we have a conference at 10:30 a.m. No, I'm gonna be there for, and I've got some stories about those, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
And hopefully, and that's been consistent theme
Yeah.
that baseball season, there's gonna be 3 or 4 days a week at 5:30. I can't be on a late call. I'm coaching a team,
Yeah.
right, or a basketball team because that's important to the example I'm trying to share for them. And I think people have recognized and become aware. And quite honestly, early in my career, if I'm honest, I was shocked at how supportive they were
Mm.
because the movies tell you corporate America looks a certain way and
Yeah.
everybody's dotting all your T's, crossing your I's,
Yeah.
watching the clock. And I'm sure there's certain environments like that. But I've
Hmm.
been fortunate enough, I think, to have leaders and build relationships that have garnered some trust based on past performance or have garnered some trust because when you build relationships and you communicate, if I have a relationship with you, Jonathan, and I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm either going to do it or I'm going to give you an update to why I'm going to be late doing it.
Yeah.
Right. Versus if I just saw you as some random person, like, why you bothering me about this thing not being done? I'll get it done when I get it done. Yeah, we know some people like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where you find that there aren't really relationships. You're just working together. You know
Right.
what I mean? So that's where I think it'd be super beneficial. And it matters, bro. I don't know. My grandmother, my mom's side said something to me one day as I was growing up. She was like, you know what? No, you're gonna do well because you're likable and you're friendly and you attract more bees with honey, right? And back then I was like, that can't be enough. But there's so many times where I think people don't realize, and it's not being fake and phony, but that who you are matters. Bring your personality to the table because there's gonna be people in different roles and decision making that gonna connect with you.
Yeah.
That we're all different, but everybody connects with with somebody. And being able to be interpersonal allows who you are to show up, what your interests are, what your passions are, whether it be, I mean, we've been on some calls, right? Certain groups like love to cook. And next thing you know, everybody's got their favorite Food Network shows. You got a little side group that's talking about recipes and bringing things in.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a golfer. There's a lot of people that golf. Some people knit. Some people meditate.
Hmm.
Some people are into growing their own gardens. Like, and all of those things matter. And you may think, oh, I just know that Janet has a garden. No, but if you realize that Janet does that 3 times a week and it's her Zen space and that's how she comes down from the day. And so when she's trying to get off on Friday evening on time, because, like that should help build some connections there. And then when you think about, wow, I know that if I need something done and accomplished, these are the people I would recommend we go get to do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Understanding not only what they do for work, but everything else helps you see too. Not only do they deliver for us, man, they're managing all this other stuff in their life,
Hmm.
right? Pretty well. It also helps be empathetic, even if they're managing stuff that quite honestly could be seen as difficult, and make sure you're not giving them the opportunities because, oh, I don't want to overload them. You can even be more aware that, hey, let's not be making decisions because we think somebody's gonna be overwhelmed. Look at how they're performing anyway. But let's be
Yeah.
empathetic to the fact that we have team members, especially if you think about coming post COVID and a lot of what people were dealing with and all that, that we need, it forced a lot of conversations about relationships, quite honestly, that
Hmm.
we need to be mindful of. But without having to have an event like COVID or the Black Lives Matter movement, the George Floyd stuff, the police brutality, pick an event that might trigger certain things to be focused on. At the end of the day, it comes down to relationships,
Yeah.
right? And the communicating, listening, but also making your voice heard, being open to that is not what you say, is how you say it,
Hmm.
and making sure you bring everybody to the table.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Man, so I'm glad you mentioned that because see, you're a leader who is very in tune to the people he leads as whole people, right?
yes,
And
yeah,
you treat them as such,
yeah,
and you build those connections and you lead them because you have a genuine concern and vested interest in them as a people excelling
right,
as whole people and being well and
yeah,
advancing and whatever their goals are, right?
yep,
Not every leader approaches leadership with that mindset.
yeah,
So for somebody that's had a leader who did not have that mindset and maybe they're either reluctant to be open
yeah,
about, from a personal standpoint and get personal,
yeah,
or they've done it in the past and then somebody used it against them in the
yeah,
workplace professionally.
yeah,
What would you say to that person in terms of not allowing the
yeah,
past experience and past damage and hurt to
yeah.
hold them back from relationship building going forward?
Yeah, first I would acknowledge that, man, that unfortunately that does exist where we have many people in leadership roles that are not what I would define as a leader, but they operate with a title and it gives them a lot of control and they use that control to manage people versus lead people, if I can say it that way. I
Okay.
would just encourage people to know that that's not representative of the whole, because I really do feel there's a way more people who really do lead in the way we're talking about, open to building dynamic relationships with people, understanding their teams, understanding their the people in their reporting structure. Can they do it with 100 people? Maybe not. But can they do it with a few? Absolutely. I would encourage people to be the olive branch too, if you're comfortable doing so, because oftentimes people who hold back, maybe having the same experience that person may be experiencing. That might have been how they've been led, and that's the only way they do it. They may have a culture of being private at work
Hmm.
and only being personal outside of work. I'll
Hmm.
just encourage people in what ways matters to them is maybe use in this, I guess there's books out there with all these techniques, right? But one of the things that I always thought about is uh, it's called form, family, occupation, recreation, and message. Now it is something that came up in an old sales technique thing, but I've learned that it's a good way to strike
Hold
up
on,
conversations.
hold on, slow down because I this was new to me.
Okay,
You said form.
form,
Can you give it to
yeah,
me again? F.
FORM,
Yep.
yeah,
And what does it stand for?
family,
Okay.
occupation,
Okay.
recreation,
Okay.
and message. And it's oftentimes a way to build rapport. And again, this is something that I think it was a book called How to Strike Up Conversations with People. As I was maturing in my career, I had to learn that there'll be a lot of people that I build relationship with or I meet that aren't exactly like me,
Yeah.
that don't come from my background, maybe don't even work in the same industry I work in, but it's still a skill that's required in life, period, to be able to strike up conversation with people. I can be at the baseball field, right? Take work out of it. And I'm on a team, my boys are on a team with kids we never played with. And all the parents are standing around watching. You know how it is. Some want to talk, some don't,
Hmm.
right? Hey, that's your son? Okay, number 8. Okay, cool. Hey, my son is number 25. I'm Jomondre. Nice to meet you. That gets into family. Is that your only son? I've got twins. Family. Before you know it, there's a 10-minute conversation around family. I actually might like this guy. Let me or this lady. They seem cool. Maybe the boys later might become friends. We may want to hang out. You know, occupation. Now, depending on when this conversation where it's happening may or may not come up. Comes up on the golf course a lot. Same approach, but even at the field. Okay, cool. Hey, what do you do? We get to talking about whatever glad it's Friday. At the man, work's been crazy. Oh, really? What do you do? That gets into occupation, right? And at some point, it gets into outside of baseball, right? Yeah, I was at the field yesterday, and I had a hoodie on. The boys got me for my birthday. The basis said I love playing golf. Hey, you golf? You ever been? So recreation. And then now, if there was a message, and if it is a relationship you want to build on, man, I'd love to grab lunch, right? Maybe we should connect. Or the conversation spikes something of something personal, like, man, I've been dealing with such and such. Well, my wife's a social worker, right? It's a side conversation. And here's an agency that offers this type of service. If you're interested, I can have her connect with you, right? And it doesn't have to always be self-fulfilling, but it gives a way to have conversations with people that are conversations that build relationships. If someone's showing a genuine interest in me about my family, my boys, and they've seen them, oh yeah, we've seen your boys out here at the park playing for a while. I may not have never met them, but okay. And so complimenting your boys or just, you know what? Okay, now let's see where this goes. And the same thing could be done in a work environment. I don't care whether you're working at the gas station, McDonald's, the Amazon warehouse, in a corporate function, in investment banking, whatever, lawyer's office. Being able to talk to people, just period, is an undervalued, I think, skill that we might think this comes naturally to people, but it doesn't always. People
Yeah.
who can do it have really worked at it, right? It
Yeah.
builds confidence and gives you a way to communicate, no matter what environment you're in. But that's one I always share. I even share with the boys, like, we be on teams all new all the time. Like, how you gonna get to know your friends? I ask them, I was like, so you've been to 3 practices now. Tell me all your teammates' names. Do they have brothers and sisters? Like, because that's where it starts, right?
Yeah.
If you take a genuine
Yeah.
interest in a person or people around you, it just
Yeah.
becomes natural to our conversation earlier. And then whether it be later in life, a few months down the road, you've been nurturing this relationship with somebody without an end game in mind, but
Yeah.
something comes up and says, hey, I heard you mentioned that you really enjoy mentoring people. My aunt has a son who's in college
Yeah.
that's debating doing X, Y, and Z. Would you mind speaking to them? Sure, here's my number. Have them call me.
Yeah.
Right? Or hey, my son or daughter or someone just graduated
Yeah.
or just got laid off. I heard that you're in a position of whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
Would you mind just having a conversation with them? That's what I mean. Versus
Yeah.
getting pinged on LinkedIn and hey, here's how I can help you. You want to talk? It's like, no, I don't want to talk. But you know what I mean? But if
Yeah.
I happen to know that person through some other channel and they then happen to be in a position to where we could have a business relationship later when it makes sense, that's different.
Yes.
But the building of that relationship out of the gate is not, in my opinion, should not be with that in mind. Now, if you're in the sales industry and you have KPIs and metrics, I get it. I may not be talking to you, but I'm talking about
Yeah.
in the general realm of building relationships.
Yeah.
Because even if you are in sales, almost every sales organization I've been a part of in my life has started with build a prospect list of who you know,
Yeah.
right? And if who you know list is not a list of relationships you've already nurtured, those conversations are quite interesting
Yeah.
to say the least. And
Yeah.
so
And,
yeah,
and
it's
even from a sales standpoint, companies want you to nurture relationships because
absolutely,
they want to maximize the business and
yeah,
build a relationship to where there's brand loyalty and they don't have to worry
yeah,
about losing somebody. And
right.
it becomes more than just about the pricing of what you're offering, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Because if
people are buying from you and your service offering or your brand more so than they even buy the company. That's why a lot of times when a person leaves a company, especially if they're sales, at
the
some point
clients go with them.
the clients go with them. No
Yeah.
matter no matter what agreements you sign over time, that client's still going back with that person because of who they are, the relationship they built, and the service they provided.
Yeah. 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 And I like your concept and your idea of having a nurturing, authentic
Yeah,
relationship building approach.
yeah,
It's much broader than just the ask,
right,
right?
exactly.
Which feels phony.
Yeah,
It adds pressure. It
it
makes it
does.
tense and tight, right?
Hmm.
And then also, I would imagine when you take that approach and you just do it in your everyday life,
Yeah,
and you've been building relationships and making it and having intentionality behind it, it's like practice.
yeah,
And you've kind of worked that muscle
yeah,
and flex that skill. And so
yeah,
when you need to apply it in the workplace, you've
yep,
already had that practice outside of work with no pressure.
yeah.
And now
It
those
is.
relationship building skills translate into the workplace, wouldn't you say?
It does. It does. It's like it becomes like compounding interest, right? It the work you put in, and if it becomes a habit, right? Talk about things becoming a habit, just like again going back to working out. Once the workout becomes a habit versus a diet, then the benefits just naturally start to show up. If you're
Yeah.
on a medication, then over time you can get off that medication. If you
Yeah.
um had a goal to build muscle over time, you see that muscle gain because of the consistency in the relationship you build with that new diet plan or health plan or gym routine.
Yeah.
It becomes second nature, and then it shows up at work. Like you said, if you happen to see somebody at the coffee machine, hey, how you doing? Oh man, it's great weather today, isn't it? Right, and it turns into a much larger conversation. Or you see that person over and over again, or
Yeah.
you happen to be on the first 3 minutes of a call if you're in a corporate environment and things are virtual, where you're waiting on everybody to get there. And how was your weekend? It just becomes natural. And then if you're in an environment where uh, you have the resource groups like that a lot of companies have right now, business resource groups or whatever the case may be, to give you space and opportunity with this more remote workforce to engage with each other, even in that environment, it becomes more natural,
Yeah.
right? Because it becomes just a natural part of who you are and how you interact with people.
Yeah.
And then over time, the deposit you're making in those relationships and how people remember you may come back as a return. But that's not the outset goal. I've just seen it so much, Jonathan, that I've just seen it happen so many times.
Yeah.
Now over that 20 years I've spent in corporate spaces, and the relationships that I've built and garnered and have been very appreciative of, have been proven fruitful. But at the end of the day, they were kind of built in based on the like genuine care about what's happening in people's lives and getting to know people.
Yeah. And then it also makes me think about internal mobility, what we call internal mobility, which is a person's ability to
Yeah.
move around within a company in
Hmm.
different roles. Maybe there's not a need in their existing role in the
Yeah.
company anymore, but they have a skill set that's transferable to other teams or other
Yeah.
departments, right? So
Yeah.
if you've made it a process of building relationships in the company cross-functionally
Yeah.
and knowing people across the organization,
Yeah.
and you become a valued person within the organization,
Yeah.
if somebody finds out that maybe your job is being eliminated and you're not needed in that capacity anymore, the odds
Yeah.
of people finding a place for you because they want you in the organization is
Right.
much greater when you build those relationships and you've done that.
Absolutely, because in that example, it becomes more about you, the person, and who people know and what they know about you, and of course your brand and what you delivered, then your
Yeah.
skills, because you're not doing a skill match. At
Yeah.
that point, it's like, okay, this person we know over the years has performed. They get along with everybody. Um, they deliver. They're honest and transparent when something's going on and going wrong. So we know that, and they know now our company. They know our industry. It would behoove us to find a spot for them, and that's where the out of those people we talked about earlier, like you got say this expanded network of relationships. Now we're talking about in your workplace. Again, no matter where you're working at, are you accountable, right? Um, have you nurtured relationships and not created negative experiences with people? Because man, I always tell people you never know who's going to be in a room you're trying to get into, or you never know who's going to be talking about you when you're not in the room, positive or negative.
Yeah.
So be careful when you're on a project and there's somebody that's making your life difficult, not to wear that on your sleeve as that's who they are forever,
Yeah.
right? Still be mindful of that, because then 6 months from now, that person could be in a different role and building an organization and building a team. And now it's like I would never want that person on my team.
Yeah.
Whereas you might want them to say, man, if I'm building a team, these are the 5 people I want. How can I go get them? You want to
Yeah.
be in those. You want to be in those conversations, and a good way to be in those conversations is letting people know who you are authentically, taking care to be interested in who they are and what they have going on. If you can add value, great, right? But just making sure that your brand is at least, or your relationship is at least in a place where they would consider you,
Yeah.
right? And that
And
just comes from being authentic in what you're doing and engaging with people, right?
yeah. And even if you make a decision that
Yeah,
you want to make a transition, a
yeah,
career transition and do something different, right?
yeah,
But you don't have any direct experience in that
yeah,
job per se.
yep,
If you built a strong enough personal brand and built those relationships, people will give you an opportunity because they know what you bring to the table as a whole,
right,
right? And they know you're a person that can be relied on to get things done and this, that, and the other. They know what transferable skills you have, even if you don't
yep,
have the perfect picture in terms of what they're looking for in the job description. The
yep,
odds of them giving you an opportunity to change course
yep,
is much greater when you've
yeah.
nurtured those relationships.
Yeah, and you get a little bit of a runway, and I'll call it either runway or the umbrella protection, right? Because if someone's
Yeah.
going to sponsor you and speak on your behalf and say, "Hey, we should give this person a chance,"
Yes.
there it generally comes also with a little bit of cover to say, "Hey, I know this is not the perfect fit. You might not have done this for 10, 15, 20 years, but here's how I'm going to support you in these early days of you picking this up. And I understand that you're not going to be perfect at it because you've never done it, but I'm going to give you some grace versus being upset with an environment, go out and think the grass is greener on the other side, which it could be or not, and then having to prove yourself in an environment and chase a role without those relationships and having to build those relationships yet again. Right. No
Yeah.
matter where you go, you should build them, but it's different than landing somewhere and rebuilding than leveraging and building the relationships where you are. And when the right opportunity comes up, being able to uh, benefit from those relationships that have been built over the years.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to also talk about inner circle because that's one of the key topics that we wanted to get into today. And
Yep.
I know that's something you're very well versed in and are very strategic and intentional about in terms of building that inner circle, knowing what types of people you need surrounding you in order to grow yourself,
Yeah.
cover your blind spots, you know what I mean, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Can you talk a little bit about the keys to developing a strong inner circle?
Yeah, yeah. I think I'll speak for me at least, and I think it's transferable though. I think you need a few things in, say, an inner circle, right? And I'll talk about this through, say work first, and I'll go personal. Let's talk work. If you're someone who's really looking at where you are in your career, how to get to the next step, how to transition to a different career path, I think that your inner circle, you benefit from having someone in your inner circle that has been where you're trying to go, right? Or has experienced what you've experienced trying to either go into something different, or maybe you've been laid off, how somebody's navigated that, right? So I think the inner circle, you should have someone who's has shared a similar experiences. I would even argue too, the second piece of that is someone who has no dog in the fight. Someone who can give it to you just straight up, transparent, raw, good, bad, and different, what you truly need to hear.
Okay.
Um, Good. Sometimes it's really good thing to validate maybe what you're thinking, but sometimes it could be information that challenges your thoughts and makes you think about things differently.
Okay.
Um, so I think that's a good thing. So someone who's been where you're trying to go that can really give it to you 100% transparent, whether it hurts your feelings or not. I think the other thing in uh, the inner circle you need is really someone can hold you accountable, right? So the person that might give you that strong advice and transparency may or may not be the same thing as someone who's going to hold you accountable with, hey, you said this was your career goals, your trajectory, your plans. Here are the things you said you're going to action to try to get you there. Hey, how things been going for the past 6 months, a year. Did you read that book? Did you take that course? Did you sign up? Right? And someone to say, hey, we talked about your plan, but you don't seem to be actioning. And I'm not just talking about something as black and white. It should be a relationship, in my opinion, still, but someone that could really say, keep you honest about how things are going. Right? You've laid this goal out. Again, I have no dog in the fight other than wanting you to achieve the goals you said you set for yourself. Um, to me, those two have been, I would say, the most important. And then the third, I probably shouldn't curse on this program, so I won't curse. But I say someone you can vent to that will listen and let you get things out, and that person should be trustworthy enough that you're not going to fear that it's going to end up somewhere that it shouldn't, right? Because I think in all of us maybe experience things that sometimes we just need to just get off her chest, talk some crap for a minute, and then all right, now thank you for letting me get that off. I'm good now, right? Like just get it out, and maybe give you some reflection things to think about. Really, the goal for that person is to be that sounding board, right? Um,
All right.
yeah,
So I've taken what you've given me,
yeah,
and I've created an acronym. So
okay,
what I've heard from you is sounding board,
yep,
someone you can vent to, trans transparency,
yep,
somebody that's going to be 100% transparent and
yep,
give it to you straight,
yep, yep,
right? Accountability,
mm-hmm,
somebody that's going to hold you accountable to what you say you're going to do,
yep,
and then relevant experience, somebody
yeah,
that's
yeah,
relevant to what you're trying to achieve that can has been there and can give you guidance and advice.
yep.
So that's STAR,
Okay,
STAR, sounding board, accountability, transparency. So sounding board, transparency, accountability, relevant experience.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's key. I think a lot of times we have conversations with people that may have our best interest at heart, but they are so close to us, they're not going to want to hurt our feelings, or they're going to tell you something they read, heard, seen in the movie, blah blah blah, that they can't really speak to directly. And we got to be careful, like we said earlier, about who we're taking advice from, and who we're really processing counsel from. If
Yes.
that makes sense. So we talk about this inner circle. To me, this inner circle may not be your best friend group. More likely, it won't be.
Mm,
Right?
okay.
Um, it might have
Why is that?
well, I think sometimes I think we seek out different things in different groups, right? So I'll use an analogy. My group that I go to the track and ride my sport bike with
Uh-huh.
serves a purpose, right?
Yeah.
They're very experienced in that world, right? And they have different experience, don't get me wrong, but like when I go to that audience in that group, we're there to have fun, to talk about the track. Most of the time we're not really talking about work. We're talking about bikes, exhaust, track times, and all that stuff.
Okay.
Um, my group, if I'm going to get together with my core group and talk strategically about, you know, financial future, career progression, that's a different group, and we all bring different levels of experiences to that discussion. And
Hmm.
then my group that I seek, say, career guidance and counsel from, some of it cross pollinates, but oftentimes that's different because depending on where you're trying to go and the goal you might have, that changes the part of my relationship pool that I need to pull from. I mentioned earlier about my friend of mine whose uncle has been a CIO, right? I need to reach out to him, but the rest of my group, right, other than the CIO I report to, if I'm talking about having a conversation with someone outside of my current organization,
Hmm.
I might have a couple more, but he's the only one I know. So I'm like, okay, I want to go as a part of the inner circle. I want to have a conversation with that person. I have a person in my circle that I know has worked in the consultative world and has been partners in different consulting organizations and ran his own company. And then later in his retirement years, and we talk about where I see myself in when I'm past 45 and 50 and what I'm thinking.
Hmm.
That's the conversation I can have because he's gone through that recently, right? And give
Hmm.
you different things to think about in a different way, both positive and negative. About yeah, I chased this, but here's what I regret, right?
Yeah.
Here's what it cost me, right? It cost me my first marriage, right? It may have cost certain people relationships with children when you're chasing certain things to build certain businesses and certain roles, and that can help you decide: am I willing to make that sacrifice? Is something that I thought was a goal of mine truly that important for me? If I'm really listening to my inner circle and they're telling me the stove is going to be hot if you go down this path, but if you're okay with that blister you're going to get, just know that's what you're walking into. I think those are important. Whereas the friend circle might be like, what are you even worried about? You're already doing a great job. And yeah, you can do anything, man. Uh, Quit your
Yeah.
job tomorrow and go start that business that you ain't got the money to fund.
Yeah.
Right? No, but because sometimes, depending on how your groups are circled, they just
Yeah.
want to continue to make you feel good, and that's
Feel
fine.
good. Yeah, yeah. But
But
sometimes
sometimes
you
it's
can,
hard. If your
yeah.
friend tells you you shouldn't do something, you might be like, why they hating?
Uh,
And that's
yeah.
just being real. But a person
That
that,
personal and emotional aspect can get in the way.
yeah, and someone from your inner circle can tell you the exact same thing, and you can process it differently because they
Oh,
don't have the same tie. You don't have, like I said, the relationship where they can't be hating because I only talk to them twice a year, or
yeah, yeah,
we
yeah.
do lunch once a quarter, and that has to be something I really should take in. And then I might go back to my friend and say, you know what, you were right.
Yeah.
But sometimes the messenger um, can get a message to you if it's the right messenger, right? It could be the same exact messenger, but depending on who's delivering it and how it's delivered, you might not
Man,
process it and hear it.
dude, you making me think about my marriage, man. You making me think about how I
It,
how somebody else can tell my wife something I've been saying for months, and
yeah.
she comes home like it's a revelation.
It's true. It's true, you
Yeah,
know.
took it
But
completely separately, completely differently from how she took it from me. But you're right,
yeah,
the
yeah,
messenger in the context of relationship definitely matters.
yeah, yeah.
Good stuff, man. So my takeaway from that was you need stars in your inner circle. So sounding
Hmm.
board, transparent person,
Hmm.
accountability partner,
Yeah,
somebody with relevant experience. I love that.
yeah, yeah. And I'll go back real on it because I know we talk about spouse a lot, relevant experience, man. That fatherhood, right? If I'm getting advice from somebody about something I'm going through, I would love to talk to someone who's been through it on the side of what I'm going through.
Mhm.
It just is what it is. If you're not as engaged in that relationship as I am, it's hard for me to ask you for your advice about something if you haven't been present the way I'm trying to be present. Now, but I can gain experience and advice from somebody telling me, I wish I would have done it differently, man. If I had to go back and do it differently, this is how I would have done it. But to tell me exactly how I should do something I'm doing right now, but you didn't live it, it's kind of tough. And then same thing with spouses. I always tell people be mindful of taking advice from somebody who's not still married, is going, you know what I'm saying? Like, because
Ooh,
it could be in the way people see marriage today is way different than it used to be as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
And so I think you have to be mindful of the advice you get and what you decide to take in, right? Because I think people have the right intentions. Um, but there's certain things that certain advice that I say, depending on who the messenger is, you might want to challenge that
yeah. All advice is not good advice.
that's what I'm trying to say. Thank you. All advice is not good advice or sound advice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. All right, yeah, man. So we've got the inner circle guidance now. I want to revisit the networking event conversation we started earlier, touched on a little bit.
Yeah.
Are networking events an effective way to build quality connections? And you said there's a place for it.
Yeah.
What would you say is the place and the benefit
Yeah.
of networking events? Because it sounds like
Yeah.
you probably don't want to try to build an inner circle through networking events. It's probably going to take a different approach. But what is the
Mhm.
value of some of those events?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple things that I would say to that. And to clarify what I said earlier, I would think going back to intentionality. So I think if you look at a specific type of event that is aligned with a goal, a passion, or something you're doing, then it could be super beneficial. The ones I have a challenge with are just the broad get together networking events that just want to bring 100 people together so you can exchange business cards and hope you do something with it, right? Versus if you have a focus in uh say real estate investment, right? And in your city, in your market, there's recurring networking events tied to the type of investments you're doing or something that you can learn and benefit. That to me is super impactful, right?
Okay.
If I want to learn more about something going to the relevant experience piece, then that's a pocket that's inviting a lot of people with the same mindset, the same interests
Yeah.
in one place
Yeah.
that could introduce me to a group of people that I can build relationships with that
Okay.
are coming to an environment open to sharing their experiences that we can all walk away and then nurture, right?
Yeah.
Different than um, meet me at the hotel Saturday at 10 a.m., ending everybody from every industry for $25 a ticket to come eat breakfast to hear somebody talk, right?
Yes.
Because it's sometimes it can be a money grab or just a lead exchange is different to me.
Okay.
So I think if you're specific about where you're going and what you want to get out of those events, if they're targeted to your goals, interest, industry, if we're talking about a work or career thing, if we're talking about personal, um, somebody might be into um, yoga even, right? And there's a big yoga event happening at Piedmont Park, let's say, and you might want to meet other people of like minds. I go to the I mentioned I like a sport bike. My core group that I go ride with, it expands over time when you get to know more people. But I'm going to an area that's specifically targeted to a thing or to an interest or to a purpose. It's
Yeah.
not just a broad event.
Got it. Yeah. And that makes sense too, because especially if you have trouble coming across people in a certain area.
of like mind, like interest.
like mind, like interest,
Yeah.
and you have trouble running across them just in every day-to-day life,
Yeah.
that brings people together that are targeted towards a specific
Yeah.
area,
Yeah.
interest.
And even like and maybe not people don't equate it like this because we're talking about going out to an event, but even organizations when I was a business analyst, there's business analyst communities online. If you are a welder and want to be aware of what other companies are hiring welders in your geographic area, there could be a group. If you're a realtor, I know there's a lot of realtor events that come together of who are the builders coming into this area, but you're also there with other people that you, again, going back to form, that you can build relationships with because most of those are very relational um, industries and environments that over time you start if you meet someone brand new, if
Yeah.
you strike up that conversation and you find it, to me it's always better if I meet somebody new, let's just talk about going to some event. You're not married, you don't have kids, and let's say you're not into golf, and there's nothing that's clicking other than potentially like we work in IT. That could sustain it, but it's a lot more sustainable and a lot more intriguing and interesting to foster a relationship with, let's say, someone in IT who is a father, who may have kids in middle school, going to high school, or just went to college, um, who's in the next phase of their marriage relationship, and they're becoming empty nesters, and we can have conversations about what's that been like
Mm-hmm.
on top of the IT connection we might have based on our careers.
So
If that
multiple shared interests.
exactly,
Yeah, yeah, it
yeah,
makes it
and if you go into a space of a networking event that is set for a targeted group that you're a part of naturally based on your career and interests, you now are even more comfortable in that room, right?
yeah,
I'm not afraid of walking up to somebody and finding out he's a venture capitalist sitting on $1 billion portfolio and me feeling inferior.
yeah.
I'm just being real, like and being in a
No,
room like that,
no,
and
right.
sitting with everybody with Rolex watches, and I'm rocking my Casio, you know. I'm just and it's a mental game we play with ourselves sometimes in
It
these
is.
rooms.
It is.
Then going in knowing like, oh wait, this room is meant for people with this experience or this passion or this interest. We're all here to learn about the same thing or share about the same thing. Now my guard is even down. Now I
Yeah,
can even be more open to have conversations with the person to the left or right of me and see
yeah,
where it goes versus feel like I'm having to insert myself, you know, into something that's unfamiliar, even more unfamiliar and more nerve-wracking than it might have already been. For me to even commit to leaving my house, put myself in an uncomfortable situation for this goal I have to expand my network.
yeah,
And you know what I mean? So
yeah.
it's the intentionality about around if you do decide to go to a networking event, to be intentional about where you're going in the room you're going to be in. Let's not just it be something random.
Yeah. Okay. Makes a lot of sense. I want to dig more into that a little bit later in terms of the intimidation
Yeah,
aspect that you just mentioned and feeling like you don't belong in the space and that kind of thing. So
yeah.
we'll definitely revisit that later.
Okay.
I want to talk a little bit about because you've shared a lot, a wealth of information about building relationships, both personally and that can benefit professionally, including the inner circle part. If I want to talk about extroversion and introversion
Mm,
because I can already think about what the mindset is of the person that's listening that's an introvert,
yeah,
that's listening to your guidance. Because the things that you mentioned in terms of like nurturing relationships, being proactive, doing it in your everyday life so that it translates over into the professional world,
mm,
taking a vested interest in people, genuine and sincere interest in people and getting to know them and that kind of thing, opening up and being open and vulnerable, sharing about yourself.
yeah,
All those to an introvert sound like very extrovert oriented habits and activities.
yeah,
And that person might have trouble relating to what you're saying in terms of, I can't just do that.
yeah,
I can't just flip a switch and go out and start talking to people I don't know. It's
yeah,
very uncomfortable. And for those who are listening that might not be familiar,
yeah,
extroverts are people who get energy from being interacting with others and being around others, usually larger crowds versus an introvert who gets energy from being in isolation kind of to themselves. They
yeah,
recharge that way. It's about energy, not about your ability to connect or relate to other people.
yeah,
So you might feel, if you're an introvert, you might feel drained after going to like a networking event because
yeah,
it drains all your energy. You might be a
yeah.
little shy with approaching people cold that you don't know and that kind of thing.
Right.
So if for somebody that's an introvert, that's listening to your advice
Yeah.
and writing down these strategies that might feel a little reluctant, a little nervous about implementing some of these techniques.
Yeah.
What guidance do you have for somebody who's an introvert to start building their inner circle and their network?
Man, I first want to acknowledge and honor that that's something I've become more aware of, I'll say probably over the past 5 to 10 years than I was early in my career, that someone can be in a room and in a meeting speaking up and still be an introvert, right? Because my mind goes to super shy, nervous, and I had to learn that's not necessarily the case, right? The things that I've seen, and I would encourage, say, introverts to consider, think about is to almost grow where you plan it, and maybe start out slower than someone who is an extrovert that has no issue going out to do. So what I mean, what do I mean by that? So if you are an introvert and he's like, yeah, but I still want to expand my network and have a bit more relationships, right? Going to the grow where you're planning, maybe start off, you know, with one relationship versus trying to tackle 5 or 6, right? There might be someone that even though you are an introvert, you're comfortable with, and being open about it if they're not aware. I think it's been recently that people have shared with me that they are introverts, like being open about it to let people know, hey, as you experience me, just know that this is who I am. And that's given me the ability to say, okay, well, I might come into something real lively and all energetic, and might not be they might not have time for it today,
Yeah.
right? Or I might get 5 minutes of it, and if that's all I get, I need to take that and appreciate that. But I would say nurture and maybe start with one relationship where there's a little bit of comfort, and then in the transparency piece, to be open with people and let them know, hey, I'm stepping out here a little bit outside of my comfort zone, because typically and however you describe that. I think people become appreciative of that if you talk about that as a part of building relationships, right? Because I know oftentimes if I ask someone the recreation piece of the form we talked about,
Hmm.
and you get a sense of it's more of an introvert who likes to stay home and read a book as their primary way, maybe like to meditate alone, take singular walks. That then helps me understand them in a different way. So what I
Hmm.
probably shouldn't do with them is invite them to a happy hour with 30 people.
Hmm.
Maybe a lunch one-on-one might be the first step. Because if I'm trying to build a relationship with an introvert, maybe
Hmm.
hey, you want to grab lunch? You want to grab coffee? Want to, maybe not meet up at the park at the first one, right? But
Yeah.
like something that gives them that, again, an olive branch to maybe help them step outside of the comfort zone versus getting pushed outside of the comfort zone.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a
you know,
good point, and I'm glad you mentioned it from that angle too. In terms of
mhm.
if you're an extrovert and you're trying to build a relationship with an introvert, you might have to approach it from a different standpoint than you're comfortable normally doing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And be a little
And
bit.
how you perceive it is not. I don't know, back in the day, it's like they kind of standoffish, and and
There
and
you go.
and 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 checking that bias too. That it's not.
Mm.
Bless you.
Thank
That
you.
it's not that they're standoffish. Is that just okay? Why might not they be as interested in a relationship? Why might they not be all, as my mom used to say, laughing and kikiing all the time at every little thing,
Yeah,
right? And having carrying that energy where that might be my approach to different situations.
yeah,
But
not passing judgment because uh,
exactly.
some people might think too, like in team meetings, for example, the
Hmm.
introvert is probably going to be a little quiet,
Hmm.
and some people might interpret them as being disengaged
Yeah.
where they might be processing, listening, absorbing,
Yeah.
and it might take them some time because they need time to process to
Yeah.
come up with their feedback or ideas.
Yeah.
So opening the door for them to either share it in the chat in the meeting
Yeah.
instead of coming off of mute, or hey, if anything comes to mind after this meeting, shoot me an email or
Yeah.
a chat separately. I'll be happy to connect with you one on one if we need to,
Yeah.
and giving them other ways to contribute to open that door and being
Yeah.
more inclusive from that standpoint.
Exactly.
I think is important too.
Yeah. And then that just made me think about, and then just being honest with yourself about your readiness level, right? You have to balance out the comfort zone that's there to protect you, right? And your readiness level, because sometimes I feel like we can be ready to take on something else, but we just get analysis paralysis, or all the things that can happen bad about something keeps us from trying it,
Yeah.
versus leaning into, well, what's the worst that can happen, to me, right? And maybe taking a step out on faith in your own way, in a small step. Some people might take bigger steps to then get some quick wins and say, okay, that wasn't that bad. Now let me take one more step. And let me take one more step. Okay, now let me maybe take a small jump, then a big jump. But sometimes we have to build those experiences to negate what we think is going to happen or to overcome all of the negative experiences that have happened for us to even believe that that it's safe to try something different.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Good point. Um, a couple more questions before I want to visit personal branding as well. And we'll talk a little bit about that because you already mentioned that. And I think that's something we definitely need to connect and tie into relationship building and how that's significant too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, some people have quality connections, but they underutilize those connections.
Mm-hmm.
How can people better leverage their relationships for professional success? How do
Yeah,
they make that transition? Because you talked about nurturing, right?
yeah,
And not coming in with an ask, but coming in with a sincere intention to build the relationships.
yeah,
If you're nervous about now going in for an ask for somebody that
yeah,
whether it's a job opportunity or
yeah,
advice or whatever the case may be, and you have
yeah,
somebody in your network that you think is really valuable in a way, and you
yeah,
want to approach them and ask, but you're a little bit nervous about it
yeah,
because you don't know if they might how they might perceive it. You've already built this relationship that's been based on genuine things, and now
yeah,
you're coming in asking for something, and you haven't done that before, right?
yeah, yeah.
Any thoughts or guidance for leveraging existing relationships that we
Yeah.
have built?
Yeah, and I can say this now, and I probably wouldn't have been able to say this some years ago. But as you build relationships, at some points you realize that, you know what, this person isn't just a person I like to hang out with, have lunch with. I see them as a friend, or I see them as, I mean, I look up to them as a mentor, whether it's an official relationship or not. Is having a conversation when you come and say, you know what, I don't know if you know this, but I look up to you. Or I see the path that you've blazed, and there's a lot of things I've learned from you, whether I told you or not. And I've said this to a couple people, and then I followed it by, you know, would you be okay in the future for us even having like real dedicated like time to spend together to mentor and coach me because of X, Y, and Z? Here, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but here's some goals that I have. At some point in relationships, an opportunity like that tends to show up, and I think we just got to be more comfortable of letting people know that because people people enjoy being seen in that way. So I'm not saying gaslight anybody or blow smoke, but if you truly have relationships with people and you truly value how you see them moving, the success they've garnered, how they've navigated from one career to the other, how they've recovered from maybe a stumbling block in their career and
Hmm.
rebuilt it, we need to honor and acknowledge that and share that with people, right? Because often we're in these relationships and everything looks great and perfect and we really don't talk, right? That's why I mentioned having somebody in your inner circle that can be transparent with you and say, listen, this is what I had to go through. You know, the if you've ever seen or if you haven't seen it, Google success iceberg. We always see the top layer of the iceberg, but we never see all the stuff that's underpinning it, that's under the water, all the struggle, all the strife, all the times we failed at something, all the times we missed the mark. We only see we only see
Yeah.
the award ceremony, let's
The
say. We don't
accent.
see all the
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, we never
yeah.
see the rest of it. But we need to have some of those conversations about what's beneath the surface,
Yeah.
and I think that helps people see not only is everybody human, that we all at the end of the day, Jonathan, we all end up going through challenges. They might be different in different scales and magnitudes. We're all showing up based on life experiences that have basically pointed us in different directions. And yeah, rambled a little bit there, but I think if you have relationships that we might not be utilizing more, just being open about how you see people and really being truthful about that and investing time to speak on it.
Yeah. Okay.
And
No,
again, the worst that can happen is somebody that tells you says, no, I don't want to help you. And then I would challenge my relationship selector. but but no, but I think that's where if you built, I'm talking about you really built relationships on not the very first time you meet somebody,
Mhm.
hey, can you help me? Unless you're in a dire circumstance, do what you need to do. But if you got a relationship you've been building, it could be over the course of the first 4 weeks if you're meeting regularly. It could be
Mhm.
over the course of a year if you only met 3 or 4 times, because you are in these similar events because you do have an interest in, forex trading, investing, writing a book, becoming an author, becoming a golf coach, whatever the
Mhm.
case may be. and being honest about, hey man, I've seen you do your thing, and I'm just curious of what was that path like because I have a goal in X, Y, and Z.
Got it.
That's where that relationship then blossoms to become not only can we kick it and have lunch and watch the game or talk about the movie or whatever shows, but now like I can carve a piece of this relationship out and say, hey, come on, I got you. Right, here's what you need to understand and consider. Tell me what's
Yeah.
going on in your world so I can better advise you on how to navigate that or how I've navigated that.
Okay.
So yeah, taking that leap to step out there in that way
Mm,
versus just saying, "Hey, I have an issue. Can you help me?"
got it. Okay. Okay. Good advice. So when it comes to mentors, does a mentor-mentee relationship, does it need to be a formalized relationship? Because some people would say, how do I approach getting a mentor? Right?
Mhm.
Like they don't even know where to start or
Yeah,
how to ask somebody. Should they ask somebody? Does it need to be a formal relationship? And if it can or it should,
yeah,
how should somebody go about finding or getting a mentor?
yeah.
Or is there a way to be mentored by people and they're not even aware of it?
Bingo, bingo. So let me make sure I answer the question. I think the most powerful mentor-mentee relationships are the ones that feel informal, whether or not they were started as formal pairings or not. The ones that are most impactful to me have been the ones that are more informal, because a lot of times what you're dealing with is people trying to build trust to put themselves out there for guidance, support, and advice.
Hmm.
And what I found, at least as when I was first obtaining my first mentors and all that, it was the relationships that were much better, stronger, and more effective were the ones that we can, you know, I want to try not to cut. We can just have conversations and shoot the, whatever, shoot the breeze.
Hmm.
Um, and then get into those other things. Well, hey, here's what I'm dealing with versus coming to the table where last week we talked about this. These are my 3 bullet points, and I said I was going to do this, and I didn't do that. That's like going to school and getting graded, right? And I found those for me, and even when I tried it early on, didn't work as well as the ones that were kind of like the star. Hey, I have an interest in this path. Someone
Hmm.
recommended I reach out to you about this. You've done this. You also mentor these people. So you get the independent transparency piece, you get the relevant experience piece, um, you get the accountability piece, right? And not in a formal way, but it's on you to schedule time with me, and I'm here for you. And I'm going to ask you about the goals you set for yourself. But if you don't do them, I'm not going to beat you over the head and charge you another $200 to talk to you next week. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think the more informal ones are the most impactful ones. And then to the point about you made at the end is super powerful because the mentors that that I would say were my first mentors didn't even know they were because they were leading by example. They were relationships that I had, but I watched how they moved. I watched how, and then I would have a conversation like, "Hey, I saw how you handled that situation at your that was pretty difficult, way different than I would have.
Hmm.
What made you handle it that way?"
Okay.
Again, didn't even say you're my mentor, but I did acknowledge, hey, I look up to how you move. I see the career trajectory you've taken.
Hmm.
Um, Mind if we talk about that? And those conversations remind me a lot of the ways back in the day what we might have gotten in the barbershops,
Yeah.
right? Or sometimes in the church, or talking to your uncle after dinner, or at a family reunion, or catching up with a old colleague and them telling their story, and then you picking up a bit and piece of how you move. But then I started to add like, man, I appreciate that. Right? I look up to you and see how you do things. And a couple of those have become, I actually look at you as my mentor, whether you know it or not. I love to schedule some time with you every once in a while to really chat about maybe some things I'm going through. Are you okay with that? And most everybody's say yes because it's on me or you to schedule that time.
Yeah.
You're the one that's there, and they will support you, but you got to be willing to own that. Don't expect them to want more out of the relationship for you than you do.
Yeah. Now you're actually you're getting into what I was going to ask next, which was
Hmm.
some of the don'ts. We've talked
Mm,
about the do's
yeah,
in relationship building, but I also want to talk about the don'ts.
yeah,
So since we're on the topic of mentorship,
yeah.
let's start with that.
Okay.
If you're a mentee aspiring
Hmm.
to have a mentor relationship with someone, what
Yeah,
are the don'ts for the
yeah,
mentee in terms of how to approach that situation with a potential mentor?
yeah. Oh man, I would say Oh, that's always see that's the half empty side. But I'm gonna go there. I always think of the do's first. I'll think of the don'ts. I would say don't expect a mentor to immediately be able to change your world.
Mm,
It doesn't work like that, right? Just because you gain a mentor does not mean that's gonna open all the doors you felt that might have been closed, or you're all of a sudden gonna get a magic bullet out of the gate, right? So setting expectations about the relationship, because it's really, again, it's a relationship building thing. That person is often there to really help give you perspective, ask you some really deep questions about what you're trying to achieve to kind of help you have some self-realization,
hmm.
at the end of the day, that should then fill you up and give you different energy to go after some things you might be after.
Right.
Um, I would say don't be afraid. Uh,
Mm,
don't be afraid to seek out or let somebody know that you've been, maybe admiring from a distance or recognize how they're moving, to
yeah.
let them know that you've recognized that they've had some success, and you're at a point in your life where you're looking for someone that you can speak with about it. I think don't be afraid even not to even ask to be a mentor. Just ask if they're open to have some conversations, because then
Yeah.
that turns into, if it's a fit,
Yeah.
a mentor-mentee relationship, right? Because sometimes the pairings just don't work. You can have someone say, "Hey, reach out and talk to somebody," and
Yeah.
that could be a really good one-time conversation, but it may not make sense to be a mentor-mentee conversation,
Okay.
right? So
And
don't be afraid. Don't be
is that
afraid to
a
reach out. Yeah.
is that a softer sell, you think, than would that potentially scare some people off if you say, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" and you put that
It
label on
could.
it?
Yeah, it could, because that comes with, on both sides, some expectations, right? A lot of times, if it's like, okay, what does that mean? People's definitions might be, oh, you want to talk to me every week for an hour,
Yeah.
right? And that may not even, and I would say that to me is not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
It could be with the right mentor-mentee relationship and the right environment, the right opportunity,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to. But sometimes people receive that as, okay, what is this person really asking of me? If
Right.
it's, I've, I love what you've done with your career. I see not only have you been successful in corporate, you seem to have your family together. You seem to have, you started a business on the side. I hear you talk about, you seem to be passionate about volunteerism. And how do you do it all? Can we chat? I'd love to take you to lunch, right?
Yeah.
I'd love to catch up.
Yeah.
And then that may spark such a good conversation that you might want to do it again.
Yeah.
And that's how you know if there's a real fit there. And then over time, it's like, man, it could fall back and just be like, man, you just cool, man. You want to go to the game, or
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, you want to catch a movie, you want to go catch this sporting event. Hey, my organization's doing X, Y, and Z. I'd love for you to come by and check it out. And over time, it could turn into something different, right?
So do,
That out of the gate, I'm looking for a mentor. Would you be my mentor, without context, without color, without that,
yeah.
the form thing? Like, really, who are you? I mean, I know you,
Yeah.
but like, why are you even looking for a mentor in this point in your life?
Yeah.
Could be met with, I don't have time.
That could
And that's,
also that could also set expectations on behalf of the mentor in terms of turn on my investment in time. Like if this person isn't doing
yeah,
anything with what I'm giving them, am I
yeah,
going to continue to invest my time with this person if they're not actually
yeah,
putting into practice what I've already given them? So
yeah.
it could do that too. So it sounds like, do you think mentor-mentee relationships, do they kind of naturally ensue more than they're formally declared in terms of each person agreeing that we're in this relationship? Is it something that kind of naturally happens over time once you've reached out to somebody for guidance?
I think it's a little bit of both. I would say if you're early in your career or in your life looking for these, it could feel a bit more formal. I have to
Yeah.
acknowledge that, right? If I'm, coming out of college in my early mid 20s, and I'm looking at potentially doing something in the career I've landed in,
Hmm.
and I know somebody's advised me that, hey, find your mentor, it could feel a bit more parent-like, where you might want a little bit more formality, right? So I want to honor that.
Hmm.
However, the same token, if you're earlier in your career and you see someone in a role or in a position, and something you might aspire to, and you've been monitoring from a distance, reaching out and saying, hey, man, I've been tracking you, been following you. Congratulations. I just saw you were awarded with X, Y, and Z. I'm not sure you're aware, if the person knows you, right? I'm pursuing X, Y, and Z. I'd love to get your take on some things I've been thinking about and get some feedback. You don't mind if I schedule 15, 30 minutes just to chat with you?
Hmm.
Again, not asking for formal mentorship at that point,
Yeah.
right? Because at the end of the day, that person may be able to add value as a mentor or may not. Because if you get some people getting these paired mentorships and think that they got to stick it out for the 12 weeks, and on week 2, they know it's not working.
Right.
They know it feels like a waste of time, but they
Yeah.
feel like they have to stay in them, right? So
Yeah.
that's why I think the natural progression and the way you approach somebody about why you would even want somebody to be an advisor or mentor to you is very important.
Yeah. That's a good point. Because everybody that's accomplished in an area doesn't make a good mentor too.
No, and the way they got there, you may quickly find out, like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes
Right?
it's fit.
Exactly. Very much so.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. And then the don'ts for relationship building in general, and leveraging quality relationships,
Mhm.
would you say are the don'ts for that more broadly out, even outside of mentorship?
Oh man, yeah, don't I want to say be flaky, right? But what I mean is let's always think about what you should do. But like what I mean is don't act like you really want a relationship if you don't, because you're wasting each other's time. It's okay to realize and prioritize relationships that you do want to invest in because time is finite, right? We only have so many hours in the day, the week that we want to share and express, and don't feel like
Mhm.
you have to force something if it's not there. Be okay walking away from some relationships that you no longer want to build or just aren't reciprocal or don't
Mhm.
meet your needs anymore, and that you're like, this season of that relationship is over. Maybe it comes back later or not. Don't be
Mhm.
afraid to acknowledge that and part ways. And I will start by saying, don't be flaky. Like, be a man or woman of your word. So if you're the one driving a relationship and setting things up and committing to do something, do your best to stick to that because it goes into I think where we're going a little bit about brand. Like, you got some of those people like, yeah, 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 so and so said they're gonna be here on time. We know they ain't coming for an hour. They're gonna be an hour and a half late,
Mm.
right? Or they've canceled on me 3 times. So do they really want to hang out or not? Right. So
Yeah.
if you're that person trying to build a relationship and like be honest, if you can't meet for 2 months, say, hey, my schedule is crazy for 2 months. I'd love to catch up, but man, June is
Yeah.
gonna be a better time for us. Maybe we can have a phone call here and there, but like far as getting together, don't try to force it if it's not gonna work. Because relationships don't you don't have to be in relationship in contact with a person every day to build a relationship.
Right.
Right. So I think sometimes we feel that way. It's like, well, I hadn't talked to a person in 2 weeks, then what's going on? It's like, nah, like I've got relationships that have been built over years where we talk maybe once a quarter.
Yeah.
Um, some might even be once a year, just a check in at a birthday time or Father's Day where we catch up or whatever the case may be. With that investment there, just know, hey, we thought about each other at an important moment in the year that's important to that other party.
Yeah.
Right. Or I know that person's experienced something or had a loss and I'm checking in because they're on my mind.
Yeah.
Those are relationship builders too. It doesn't have to be quantity over quality.
Yeah. So how many times would you reach out to somebody that's not reciprocating? Let's say it's one of those relevant experience people.
Yeah.
You're trying to learn from them or take, and they might be busy or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
How many times would you attempt to make a connection before you say, they're probably not interested?
Um, I don't know if there's a given number. If it's someone that I've been watching from a distance, I think is what you're asking, and I don't really have a relationship with, but I actually was trying to say, hey, I've been keeping up with you. I've seen you on LinkedIn, or I've seen you in our industry articles, or I've seen you on Facebook, celebrating, whatever the case may be. I've seen you on Instagram. Maybe 3 if I'm really, really wanting to pursue that. I hate to put a number on it though, right? Because I
Yeah.
also am one that I don't like to pester people. I don't like to beg. I have this habit. I'm not going to beg you to take my money when I'm dealing with vendors and stuff, right? If I'm reaching out to a vendor for an estimate, but I hate. But it depends on what you're after, right? Like you said, some people could be there. Now, I said 3. It might be 3 within a short window. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean I might not reach back out next year as I'm still seeing that person do some things and then in a year I may have changed in myself and be at a different point to say, hey, I still love to catch up.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't put a number on it, but me personally, I don't like to pester, and I might put space between them.
How you feel about warm introductions? Like if you know somebody that knows somebody,
Yes,
trying to leverage that
yeah,
to have that person kind of introduce you or let the person know, hey, this
yeah,
person's interested in talking to you.
yeah.
Is that a good approach as well?
I'm a huge advocate of that. The thing that I would make ask people to be mindful of is the person you're going to ask to do the introduction. What relationship do you have with that person?
Oh,
Right?
Yeah.
The ones that are tricky is if you're reaching out to someone that you're not in relationship with and asking them to put their relationship on the line on your behalf.
Yeah.
So if I'm in a relationship with someone and someone reaches out to me and say, "Hey, I have a," and this has actually happened recently with all the stuff that's happening with layoffs and all this kind of stuff, right?
Hmm.
Several times. Hey, I understand you're in a certain space. Here's what's going on. Would you be open to putting my friend or this person in front of somebody? And first thing I do is say, hey, let me talk to you about this person. You
Yes.
have the relationship with them.
Hmm.
If you were me, would you do it? Most time it's yes, because they're reaching out to me anyway. Okay. I was like, then now let me talk to that person.
Yeah.
Because why? He's like, well, Jomondre, why don't you just do it? You're in a position to put, because I need the person to understand that I'm willing to sponsor you and I'm a half full. I will sponsor people sometime when I shouldn't, but I want to have that conversation if I can to say, hey, here's some questions that I might get. Let me talk to you about it. What's your background? What's the story?
Yeah.
Because if I'm going to propose, I don't want to just put your business card out there with no context, never have
Yeah.
worked with you before. You're just a name. Because then, like, well, when I do this and I go to that well, I want it to come with some context and some edification. So at
Yeah.
least I want to talk to you to know, okay, I know you through somebody. What you're asking and why you're asking to be introduced makes sense, right? Let me see if I can bridge the gap, and then it might change who I introduce you to. The person that you're asking me to introduce you to may not even be the right person based on what you're trying to achieve, right? It's like, okay, I
Right.
could introduce you to that person, but here's based on what you said, here's who I should introduce you to first,
Yeah.
right? And let's see if that conversation goes anywhere. Because at the end of the day, we're just trying to build a bridge and give somebody the opportunity to start a net new relationship versus going out and making promises. And I always tell people, I can't promise you anything. Here's how I typically do this. Here's why I asked to chat with you first. Sometimes it's on a three-way with the person doing the introduction. Sometimes it's just, hey, have them call me tomorrow at 1 o'clock so we can catch up so that we can both understand what we're after.
Yeah.
But yeah, the long way from me saying yes, I think I'm very much an advocate for using that process. I just ask people to think about the relationship you have that you're trying to leverage
Yeah.
and be open to sharing and making your case to the person you're asking to sponsor you, quite honestly, to speak on
Right.
your behalf.
Plus, if you vouch for somebody, it can reflect on your personal brand in terms of that
Yes, it
that
can.
person, how that person conducts
Yeah,
themselves or how it
yeah,
turns out. So you got to be
yeah,
very careful about
yeah,
that, even though you're well intended and we
yeah.
want to help people.
And it's unfortunate because sometimes I'll just speak for our community. It's like we get a bad rap for you're in a position, but you're not willing to help anybody, right? Or, why aren't you helping anybody? And then when you go out and say, well, I'm here, let's talk about it. Here's what I want to kind of prepare. Are you willing to do that? Sometimes it's like, well, why's got to be all that? Why can't you just, right? And on one hand, it's like you want me to vouch for somebody who's been fired from the last 8 jobs they've had,
Hmm.
that's walked off, right? And shown a propensity to not deliver. You want me now to put my brand next to that and do it. Take color out of it. I don't care who you are.
Yeah,
That's a tough thing to ask
it
someone to
is.
do.
It is.
But if
And
you've shown that
it's
maybe
an unfair thing to ask somebody to do
it
that.
is.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm only gonna sponsor people that have a great track record, but at least we want to understand, okay, if you've had some struggles in the past, how have you navigated it and what's the story that helps us position you for this next point in your life.